After the cancer, we were on a holiday in northern Spain and I saw lots of people walking along a really busy road. And I said to my husband, why? We've got this whole beautiful landscape. Why are people walking beside the road? And he said, oh no, they're pilgrims. Remember my friend? And that just reignited this idea that, okay, I am alive and I want to challenge myself. And so I walked. I think all of the things that you mentioned, the culture, the people, the history, the significance, the ease of traveling, all of those things makes the Camino accessible. We should put some reality back into the information that we're sharing with people so that they know what they're going to expect, that it is not all going to be flowy dresses and beautiful hotels and cafes. There's going to be food poisoning and different hygiene standards, and it's going to be baking hot, or there's going to be mosquitoes and this kind of thing. So,
hey guys, Triston here for the Backpacker Society. Welcome to the show. As always, whether you're new to the show or you've listened before, thanks for coming by and hanging out. And I hope you'll be inspired by travel today. If you've ever thought about lesser known parts of France, or if you've ever heard about the Camino and wondered what it might be like to travel entirely by foot, then stick around because my guest today, Colleen, shares her experience walking the famous Camino trails in Spain and some of the realities that go into doing something like that. We also talk about the region of Dordogne, France, an area that she's lived in for 18 years. And we also talk about the idea of slower travel among older independent adults later in life. After the interview, I'll share a few thoughts on potentially the unexpected sense of community you reach on the road, along with some alternative ways people explore the world. But for now, let's roll into our interview with Colleen. All right. Good morning, Colleen. I think it's morning on your side, right?
it is good morning. Yes. How are you?
Yes, I'm doing well. How was the flight over to Siem Reap?
Well, we only had an hour and a half flight because we were already in Laos, so we just hopped across the border. So it was very good, easy, on time, both little airports, so not too much hassle.
Very good. You said you were in Languabang, right? So you flew out from there?
Yeah, we did. We'd travelled around Laos, gone back to Luang Prabang, and flown from there because that was the cheapest. We were closest to Cambodia when we were at the southern end of Laos, but for some reason the flights down there from the capital were like 2 or 3 times the price, so we just took the train back.
And of course, we'll talk a lot about the trip, but I know I saw some pictures. Obviously, I know you were in Thailand for a while, which is my typical stomping ground. So hopefully it was a good time there. First time for you there, right?
We've been to Thailand before, 3 years ago, and actually by coincidence, the day we flew into Siem Reap, we flew out 3 years ago. It was one of our first adventures. But so we'd been to Thailand before, but not to northern Thailand around Chiang Mai, and everybody that we met of the kind of traveling nomads and the older people said, oh yeah, Chiang Mai is wonderful, you have to go there. And I really, really wanted to do the boat from northern Thailand. And so it kind of fitted with our plans on this trip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the slow boat. I think I saw some pictures about that. So although yours looked a little bit, compared to the one I did, looked a little bit fancy. I don't know if it was a separate one you did or you just got, a little bit more fancy, but I know it's a good experience either way for sure.
We'd booked, some friends of ours did a cruise called by a company called Nagy, and it didn't feel fancy, but it felt very comfortable, very pleasant for Southeast Asia. And then when we heard from some other people about their experiences, we were like, okay, so maybe it was really, really good. But it was simple and it was on a long boat, but we did get to stay in a very nice hotel partway down, which obviously adds to the comfort.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, I'm sure we'll definitely talk more about those travels in general. But I kind of want to set up the kind of the flow, and then we'll get into it. But I know you've done a few podcasts before, obviously. Where's your head for this one? What are you feeling?
I guess there are a couple of things. I mean, we travel with a backpack, so I did keep my backpack. I didn't unpack it last night. I kept it. just in case you wanted to talk about a backpack. Because lots of people say they travel with carry-on, and they don't really. They travel on carry-on for long haul, but not on shorter flights. I think in some ways, I mean, obviously my passion is the Camino, but
Mm-hmm.
I also feel that there are a lot of people our age who don't have a voice, or I don't know, are represented in a different way. Like maybe they travel only on tours and they can only go on expensive tours, and maybe everything is geared to a younger person or a richer person, and it isn't. So I guess that's part of the voice. And
Mm-hmm.
also, I met another traveler a couple of days ago, and we were saying how frustrating it is when bloggers and people who create online information, and it's even worse with AI, rave about places and say, oh, this is heaven on earth, you've got to go there. And you go there and it's kind of disappointing, and you think, why am I here? And I wish there was these days. I think in the last couple of years it's maybe worse. I don't know if that's because there's more people trying to get a voice out there, but I think we should put some reality back into the information that we're sharing with people, so that if you have somebody who takes the slow boat from Laos and ends up in Luang Prabang, or even places like Van Vienne, they know what they're going to expect, that it is not all going to be flowy dresses and beautiful hotels and cafes, that there's going to be food poisoning and different hygiene standards, and it's going to be baking hot, or there's going to be mosquitoes and this kind of thing. So I guess that, but at the same time, not putting people off, but trying to get people to embrace the reality of those places.
No, 100%. And, that's why I like having these conversations. I don't know if you've stayed much at hostels and kind of experienced, meeting other people. We will definitely get into that as far as how you travel. But I kind of look at this as sort of the commons area, right? If you're at a good hostel, there's always an area where you can sit and meet people, and you have these sort of conversations as far as what to expect. So, as we will
For
today with
sure, for sure.
your,
And I don't know if your audience is predominantly American, but we're obviously not. And so there's so many sites, especially for older people, that go on about points. And it's okay if you've got a credit card and you can collect lots of points, but we don't stay in the Marriott. We have a budget that we stick to. Like I say, we like hostels. If there are some great hostels, and they are not just the domain of young backpackers. And we stay in homestays, and a lot of people again are nervous about staying in that kind of accommodation for various reasons. But a lot of older people write great blogs and provide great material, but it's all about expensive hotels and points and how to hack cheap flights. And a lot of people just can't do that. So that feels like another barrier for some people who want to travel but feel they can't.
hmm I love that. We'll touch on those things. Let's first. So as far as the flow, from here, we'll take some time to get to know you a little bit better as a person, and then from there, we'll kind of get more into your insight as far as a specific location in France, where you've lived for 18 years. From there, we'll get into your getting to know you more as a traveler. So how you like to travel. You mentioned some things already, of course. And then we will get into some of the travel topics that you have for us today. So we'll definitely hit back to some of the things that we were just talking, because I think there's a lot there that we can kind of explore and dive in a bit more. But let's get going from there. Sound good?
Yeah, nice cat, by the way.
Awesome. Yes, you probably see that somewhere. Hopefully she doesn't mess up any of the lights, but that's okay. Um, so first question then for you. So you spent 14 years as a singer, for a soul and Motown event band, lead singer of the Candies, performing across France, Spain, the UK, and even had a cruise residency.
Yeah,
So I'm curious, like, how did you develop your love for singing and your overall taste of music?
I have sung, I think, for as long as I've been able to talk. And my mom used to say that the first song I ever sang was She Loves You, Yeah, Yeah, Yeah by the Beatles. It came out when I was a toddler, so that's how old I am. And I can remember singing in church choir from the age of about 5 or 6. I remember needing a reading test because I was a bit too young to join and they wanted to be sure. So I think I grew up learning to read and read music, and music has always been a part of my life. I learned to play the guitar and the clarinet. And when I was 14, I discovered musical theatre. And I did that until I was pregnant at 35, and then I stopped. So music has just always been a part of my life. And I think I had things at home when were never perfect. My mum was very sick. My dad was quite angry about all that was going on in his world. And so music, being able to escape to drama club and music lessons and choir practice was a great escape. So not only did I feel I had the ability to do something like play music and be music, and maybe I just inherited a musical soul from my mum who played piano, but I also loved music. So it's always been a part of my life. And it waned when children came along and life took over. But as far as getting into singing was concerned, I was diagnosed with throat cancer 14 years ago. And I didn't know at the end of that whether I would have a speaking voice, let alone a singing voice. And we were living in France at that time. And I was talking to my hairdresser and said, I need my haircut. I'm going into, it's been diagnosed as cancer. And instead of saying, oh my God, you've got cancer, she was like, oh, my husband's looking for a singer in his band. And that was it. So I did go for an audition, and it was totally different from this kind of music that I had done before, because I'd done theatre and musical comedy. It's a different kind of singing and stage presence. But I got into that, and it was a small band, but it grew. And then I decided I wanted to do more. So I formed the Candies, and that just really grew. So that, yeah, we also I felt I was a lead singer in a typical 5-piece band, and it was a wedding band, and it was successful. But the music of a lot of bands of a certain age is all very similar. And whilst it's great classic tunes, it's not always what a lot of women would choose to get up and dance to. And Motown and soul is multi-generational, and pop and disco, and it crosses nationalities. And there are tunes that everybody knows, and they hear the first opening bars and they're like, oh yeah, like My Girl is a classic example. I Will Survive, September. They're all amazing songs that people around the world know. And I felt I wanted to create a band that found those classic songs, whether they be something from 2024 or from 1964, and perform them. And so I found two other ladies, and it just went.
And I know, obviously, reading or doing my research, you had cancer, but to hear that you had throat cancer in particular, considering how much your love for music was, you kind of alluded to it there, but I'm sure that must have been even, obviously cancer in itself is tough, but even just like a punch to the gut as well with that. But so obviously the hairdresser told you about the band. So did you still had you recovered, or were you still like?
No, I had surgery. So it was in my thyroid, and my thyroid hadn't been working. And by chance, my doctor in France diagnosed it. So I had been sick for a long time after my son had been born. So he was 12 when I was diagnosed. So you can tell there was a long, slow decline where nobody could quite put their finger on what was wrong with me, but there was always something wrong. And so I had gone to my hairdresser after the surgery that had removed my thyroid, where they had said, okay, yeah, it's cancer, you now have to start treatment. So I was kind of in between the two. And maybe it was a good distraction, but my singing voice was really bad because they cut through everything here. So, but I still did enough for the audition, so they were happy enough.
I'm awesome. You were still able to push through and still be able to sing for sure. And obviously, congrats on the recovery and health, wealth and health. To follow up on that question though, so obviously being a lead singer, singing in general, takes confidence. Being on the stage, you mentioned musical theater as well. Did confidence or does confidence come naturally to you, or was that something that you had to grow into over time?
Actually, I think a lot of performers, and maybe it's true of a lot of artists in real life, are quite introvert and quiet. I think for me, I am not naturally a confident person, but most people who know me would think I was. As I
Mm.
grew up in a household that was a bit troubled, you learn from a very young age to sort of paint on a smile and think, yeah, life is wonderful. And I think I've just carried that on into adulthood, and that it was a skill, I guess, I learned from a young age. Just suck it up and smile and get on with it. And inside, you might be thinking, oh my God, I don't want to do this. Please make it stop. But you still do it anyway. And maybe everybody feels like that. I don't know. But I feel as though I'm very good at pretending to be super confident. And maybe only my husband and my family will know that inside I'm like this little, oh my God, I can't do this. So, which is a real conflict because people expect something of you. And the other thing about performing is that you put on the makeup and you put on the sequins or the costume and step into being somebody else, maybe your alter ego, the person that you want to be. And so people always say with karaoke, oh, you can sing, and it's like, no, absolutely not, I can't, because that is the real me, but out there is a performance.
Mm. That makes sense, and I can relate to that too. I feel like there's definitely times where I guess an ambivert, I can be super outgoing, but then need my time to myself, basically. So totally makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Next question, then. You've described yourself before as a bit of a princess, right? Liking neat things, tidy, comfortable. If someone met that version of you at its peak, what do you feel like someone would probably assume about you
About me, I
at that
think
time?
people would have assumed that I was a little bit of I wasn't a rich girl, but maybe a middle class grammar school girl, bit English, bit posh, bit of a snob, maybe a bit narrow minded, which I never was. But maybe I never portrayed on the outside the person I was on the inside, and maybe because of this wanting to well, not being an extrovert when you're on your own or quiet, because people see you as being that outwardly confident person, when you do withdraw, and I've got a bit of a resting bitch face as well, so I might look quite miserable because I look blank, and so I feel as though people either thought I was a little bit snobbish or a little bit privileged. um, I'm sure they most probably thought I was politically very different than I am, and maybe that I was a bit standoffish. And I work really hard not to be that.
And by the way, you do not have an RBF, so no, at least from what I see, not at all. So you mentioned about your love of the Camino, which of course we will talk about. Excuse me. So your passion project, Then We Walked, has grown into a popular blog with resources and real community just around that, walking the Camino, and travel for seniors. So I'm curious, was writing and the idea of building community sort of again part of who you were, or did that naturally grow as a labor of love through this journey?
Yeah, it did. So after my cancer, I a friend of mine had walked the Camino maybe in the early 2000s. And I remember I like a walk, it's nice to have a little walk. And I remember thinking, that would be cool, and looked on a map and thought, oh no, that's really 800 kilometers across Spain. That is crazy. But I think, like a lot of people, it plants a seed and it just sits there. And after the cancer, we were on a holiday in northern Spain, and I saw lots of people walking along a really busy road. And I said to my husband, why? We've got this whole beautiful landscape. Why are people walking beside the road? And he said, oh no, they're pilgrims. Do you remember my friend? And that just reignited this idea that, okay, I am alive and I want to challenge myself. And so I walked. And rather than, I bought my first smartphone for that walk. So internet and email and communication, and I guess even Facebook was still, all of this social media stuff was in its infancy. And I didn't want to have to reply to people and go onto social media and let friends and family know what was happening. So I started a blog. That's how long ago it was, with the old Google Blogger. And it was, the sole purpose was to let friends and family know what I was doing whilst I walked. And I added photos, which I love now, taking photographs and sharing those. And I learned that I really loved the process of writing at the end of the day. That if you're walking solo, the process of really thinking about your thoughts that you've had as you've walked. I don't know, there's something very soothing about that, and reflective, and the more I walked, the more I realized that it was giving voice to things that I'd never considered before and writing about them. So the writing grew from that. When I did my second long walk, which was the Via de la Plata, so over 1,000 kilometers, everybody said, keep your blog again. We'd love to. And I think in that walk, the thought process, the idea of the thoughts and what I was thinking, I really enjoyed the process of writing. So what I learned over those few years was that I love the writing and I love the photos. And that kind of evolved eventually into what I have now, which on this journey, I've decided has become something it never was. The purpose of writing was to be honest, not just to inform, but to say, hey, this place is not so great, or you might not enjoy this, or I thought XYZ. And so with all the rise in Google algorithms and updates and AI, I think actually I want to step back to what my blog was about originally. So I'm quite happy to inform people of factual stuff, but I'd like it to be a little bit more about my thoughts as well.
More your reflections. And to be fair, like definitely people can still learn through those reflections as well. So it definitely makes sense. You might have covered it, but when did it? So at the beginning, when you started writing and maybe like blogging and putting it online, when did it sort of, if you can really kind of, when did it sort of turn into or turn from writing it for yourself to writing it for other people, if that makes sense?
It would have been around 2019. And what triggered it was I started a walking club in France. And because I thought, well, there must be other people around me that like a walk. And that started to grow. And I also had a friend who was my walking buddy and the first friend that I made in France. And she had kids the same age. And we'd walked a few Caminos together. And kind of one Thursday afternoon, I went to her house and she was sick. And 10 weeks later, she died. And it was such a wake up call. Yeah, she was 51. And both myself and my husband thought, okay, we don't know what is around the corner. So we need to do stuff that we planned. And one of the things that me and my friend had planned was to take people on walks and introduce them to the Camino and build this community. And so I decided to stop procrastinating and just do it. And in 2019, I was contacted by an international women's group who arranged trips for women, and they asked me to arrange some walking trips for them. So I registered as a walking guide in France and planned lots of walks. And then, of course, 2020 happened and it all fell apart. And when we came back to normal, I kind of shifted the emphasis from thinking about guided walks to just thinking about the writing and how I could get other people interested in something just by telling them how to do it.
Awesome. All right. So for this section, last question, finally, in 5 words or less, describe your personality.
Loud, opinionated, emotional, caring, frustrated by the
That's
world, I should add, sometimes.
it has its moments for sure. Is there anything else you'd like to add for this section, or are you ready to move on to sharing some local insight about France?
No, I think I guess we'll come back to talking about the whole confidence thing, either with travel or with walking a bit
Oh,
later.
definitely, we will come back for sure. For now, let's transition then to France. So Périgord and the Dordogne. I correct me if I said that wrong. Um, so we're going to focus on the. Is it the same area or two different areas?
Well, we live about an hour from Bordeaux, which most people know, which is why we say Bordeaux. We actually live in an area, the old fashioned name for it was the Périgord, which people also may know. Now it's called the Dordogne, La Dordogne. And we're in between two towns, which again, people may know if they're in Europe. I don't know elsewhere, but it's Périgueux and Bergerac are the two towns. And but it's about an hour from Bordeaux, and most people find that easier.
Gotcha. And then just to give context before I let you just share wherever you'd like, you lived there for about 18 years. You mentioned you moved from your home, the UK, over, and then you've been there since. So with that, feel free, go ahead and share some specific things to see and do and experience in your region.
Okay, so the Périgord is a really popular tourist area, and it's very classic French. So people think of chateaus, they think of the Loire and the grand chateaus of the Loire Valley, but the Dordogne and where we live, there are more chateaus, but people don't think of the older medieval kind of castles necessarily as chateau. But they say that whilst the giants were on the way to the Loire to build the famous chateaus, their bag had a hole in it and they dropped hundreds of them along the Dordogne. So locals will say that there are far more where we live. And for me, I guess one of the best things, or there are two things about the area for me that I love to visit and love taking people to visit. So there are caves around Les, a place called Les de Traillac, and Le Sceau. And the Le Sceau caves are really famous because of the age, and Les because that's where Neolithic caves were found, and the whole history of human evolution has its roots in a lot of that area. So it's famous for its prehistory. And once when we were on holiday, before we moved, we went to some caves in a place called Ruffignac, which is the less famous and of the caves. And just walking through, seeing fires that were made by people 60,000 years ago, you're like, wow, this is crazy. So the whole prehistory is quite mind-blowing. I'm not sure when people come to the Dordogne on holiday, they know about that, but it is a big part of the region's history. Obviously, another huge part of the region's history is wine. There is so much wine. We're on the border of Bordeaux and Saint-Emilion, which is hugely famous worldwide for its top wines. But where we live, we've got Perchemont and Montbazillac and Saussignac and some really great wines too. So a lot of people come for the wine and the food. We're kind of the duck capital of France and the walnut capital of France. It seems as though it's kind of a center for great food and great regional cuisine. So it has good weather in the summer. We get 4 very distinct seasons. It's hugely popular. And the other reason that one of the things that I totally love and one of my favorite places, there's a chateau called Baynac, and it's in a village. France has a thing, it's a bit like UNESCO for France, where they rate villages and they call them the most beautiful villages in France, les plus belles villages de France, or villages de France. And there are several where we live, but one is Baynac, and that's got the home of Richard the Lionheart, which is one of my favorite places to go. And to think that this man who I learned about in history in 1116 or something, lived here in this castle and looked out at the same view. And you can go and visit the chateau and walk where he walked. He wasn't there for long, but Richard the Lionheart was French. He wasn't English, although he was the English king. And the French call him Richard le Cœur de Lion, which means the heart of the lion. So all of those things make me love the region where we live. There are, I think, 11 most beautiful villages in France within an hour of us, and great wine regions and incredible food and beautiful landscapes.
Awesome. You might have mentioned it by name, but there was something you said about or you mentioned in your notes about local restaurants that tourists miss. Can you share a bit more about that?
I think so. A lot of people come and they visit this area, and they tend to stay in what the French would call a gîte, which is Gites. And I guess it's just a holiday home, a holiday cottage that people can rent. And if you're lucky, the people who are running that place will tell you about the local restaurants that they know about. Because as with any touristy area, there are places where tourists go and it's super busy, and it doesn't mean to say the quality isn't good, but it may not be as authentic, or it may just be full of tourists, and it might be usual tourist fare. And if you can find out about the places where tourists are less likely to go, where the locals say, try this restaurant, you'll probably find excellent value, maybe home cooked if you're lucky, but just a different experience and ambiance, which is not the usual sort of burger and chips tourist fare. Yeah. And we know of a few restaurants that have evolved over the years, and some of them cater for a different kind of market now, but they're still great. And others that we've stumbled upon, and unless you're there in that village, you wouldn't necessarily go to. And my husband, he's got some friends, and they have once a month what they call boys' lunch. And it's the responsibility of one of they're grumpy old men, basically. They're all around 60, and they go out and talk, apparently not gossip about serious things. But food is the center of that conversation, and they each have to find somewhere great and different. And they have actually, between them, found some really, really wonderful restaurants that we'll go and visit. And if you are coming to the Périgord region, I would definitely say to people, try and find some local menus. Most of the time, it's lunchtime menus are going to be better than evening menus. Culturally, the French eat at lunchtime, not at bedtime, sort of thing. So, and ask around and see where people recommend, or go onto some of the forums and Facebook groups and see if there are local people who can say, oh, if you're going to be in that area, book a table at this restaurant. We know restaurants around us where we can go out and for maybe 16 or 17 euros have 4 courses and wine and water and bread and a really excellent local produce and meal, which is less than what I paid for a glass of wine when I was in Napa Valley.
It actually reminds me a bit. I stayed, actually my first time traveling was to France. I did a volunteering thing and stayed with a family, but you talked about obviously wine, well, France in general, just wine. But I remember pretty much every meal, a bit of the red, a bit of the rosé, literally for every meal we had. So I'm sure the wine is great overall in that area for sure.
And wine, I have to say that I don't always think French wine is the best. There is some great wine, but we've just come back from Mendoza and Argentina and had some amazing wines. So that's one of the things when we're traveling, we do get to taste different. I love Spanish wine. I mean, a Rioja is fabulous, but our neighbor sells wine, and so he has got us a few really fabulous wines, and there are some amazing small local vineyards which tourists again or you wouldn't get in a supermarket, and there are some really great local wine tours. It can be a little bit pricey, but they include going to places that you probably would never think of. You know, people flock to Saint-Emilion because it's famous, and the Medoc and the Bordeaux wines, but come out of those really well-known, exclusive, high-end places, and you can go wine tasting in some little. There are a lot of English speaking vineyards now where expats, or not, I hate that word, but where immigrants have come in from around the world and decided to make wine, and some of them are really great. They've learned from local people, they've brought experience and flavors from around the world, and so you can find lots of little places to visit that are not so well known. And I guess if you're coming to our region, that's my key bit of advice, is rent a car and try and go away from the obvious tourist centres, because it's such a beautiful region and so many little local restaurants and vineyards and wineries.
Mm-hmm. I was just you beat me to it. I was just going to ask why a car unlocks the region. I know you mentioned it's about an hour from Bordeaux. You said, but yeah, when they're driving around, like how far out are they going that hour out, or how long of a drive would it be to get to somewhere that's a little bit less, less touristy, basically, or worth going to visit?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to stay in the tourist areas. They're busy because they're beautiful, and there's a reason for that. If you're coming to France, I would avoid August. You know, the first 2 weeks of August are almost like a national holiday. So everybody travels on the roads. The roads are absolutely crazy, and everywhere is super expensive and busy. Also, school holidays in France are July and August. So everywhere again tends to be busier and pricier. If you travel outside of that time, like September and October, where we live, it's a beautiful time of year. And June also, and there's lots of spring festivals and places to visit before the bulk of the European school holidays start. So it's shoulder season, it's a bit cheaper, less busy on the roads. But I have to say, French roads where we live, they're not busy. You can drive on a motorway, and if it's not a Saturday kind of changeover travel day, you might see a car 100 meters in front of you and one behind, and that's it. And on the quieter roads, your biggest obstacle is going to be cyclists, because there's always a group of cyclists out on the road. So you don't have to travel that far. We're between two towns that are, Périgueux is the capital of our department, and Bergerac is another big-sized town. So we're about half an hour from both, and it feels like we're in the middle of nowhere. So you don't have to travel too far to be very remote, but accessible to other places. So for us, Saint-Emilion is 45-minute drive. The chateaus and the heart of the Périgord is 45 minutes to an hour to Sarlat, which is a very famous city, and UNESCO, the whole town. And we can jump on a train and be in Bordeaux, in the heart of the centre of Bordeaux, in an hour. So it's easy to use. Buses are terrible where we are, non-existent. Public transport isn't amazing. Trains are excellent. And hire a car, because the roads are, certainly in rural France, are quiet and easy. And unlike the UK, we don't have the really high banks, so you can see a lot when you're driving.
And when you said buses, do you mean like a Flixbus or a Greyhound or something like that, or the actual local transportation?
They do have Flix buses,
Or,
but I mean like city buses and inter-town local buses. It's certainly where we are, they just don't exist. People use school buses sometimes, but I don't want to get up at 7:30 in the morning, so it's not going to happen.
And actually, you mentioned Bergerac, and I just had a click. Cyrano de Bergerac. No,
Yeah,
is that?
that's him.
Yeah.
And the Musketeers, and although they weren't from there, he was like part of that whole story, but they were further south. But that's him, and there is a statue
Oh,
of him in the town. I'm not sure he's actually a real person. He said he didn't have the really big nose, but
very cool.
it
Yeah,
is
just
of
click.
that Bergerac. Yeah.
Cool. Talk about just everyday French life versus, I guess, tourist France.
I guess, I mean, France is a big country for its populations. It has the same size sort of population as the UK, but obviously it's about 6 times the landmass, I think. So it's much more rural, community based. Whereas in the UK, although there's a lot of rural areas, people tend to levitate towards cities and bigger centres. And I think because of the geography of France, and maybe because of the French culture, people are much more centered around their community and their area. So, which is great because there are more things going on in those communities. I mean, not all, and it is changing as the population changes, but there are still lots of smaller village and town schools, and so children tend to go to school knowing the people that are living around them. And there are 500 people that live in our commune, but there are still lots of things happening all the time in our village hall. We still have a village school. There's things like a walking club and a little cooking class, and they do lots of things within the community. And I think that is true across France. And I don't want to romanticize it because it is changing. The population is changing and economics changes that. But I guess somebody once told me that the world is still recovering or taking into effect the impact of the French Revolution and how it changed the world, that there are still ripples on a pond having that effect. And France is complex, I think, because of its history, and French people are very respectful of how things are done. And sometimes that's misinterpreted as a bit standoffish or rude, and it's really not. It's just that's how it's done. And I guess French people gave up a lot to have the culture and the rights that they now have. So I guess they want to hold on to that. And all of that history affects communities and how France wants to continue to be French and hold on to the things that are really important, like food and old recipes and wine of their region and their way of life, and spring festivals and autumn festivals. And all of that is still very much part of village life. And it's part of the attraction of why people want to live there. But equally, it can be very frustrating if you're outside of that and you're used to another way of life. But there's all of that part of France. But there's also France that is very forward thinking and very technology and science and racing ahead. So I think there is France of the 21st century and France of the 19th and 20th century. And somewhere in there, they are still trying to find the best way forward. But they, when my son was at school, philosophy was part of the curriculum. Even as a 16 and 17-year-old young man, philosophy was still part of his weekly lessons, and I'd pick him up every week, and he would have it would be a Wednesday, and he would have had philosophy, and he'd have this rant about something. Oh, my philosophy teacher said XYZ, and it's totally wrong, and it's really annoying, and this teenage angst would be there. And I said to him one day, because this teacher is rubbish, he's so bad. And I said, or maybe he's actually brilliant, because look how much you're thinking about the questions he's raised. And the very fact that teenagers and young adults are still having philosophy lessons to make them question the world and situations, maybe is part of what makes France the way it is, that culture is important and thinking about difficult issues is important and trying to find a fair way through. And they don't always get it right, but I do believe that they are a culture and a society that is trying to juggle the monumental history with advancing into the future, if that makes sense.
No, definitely, definitely. Keeps them challenged as well and on their toes. We will talk
And
a
I
bit
would
more.
like to, sorry, just say,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
would also like to say, I do sometimes think that that is very misunderstood. And the French people are sometimes portrayed as something that they're not, because French people are warm and funny and they embrace anything and everything. They'll have a go at all sorts. And our neighbours are like family, and we could not have been more welcomed. And sometimes that's not portrayed, but that is France. And French people, we have always found to be extremely generous and welcoming and kind. And I don't want, I don't want people to think that that's lost. It's just that there's also so much history that they're trying to balance. I guess they've the scales and they're balancing it, and we think they're doing a great job.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I was gonna. You just reminded me, and I don't think it was you. It might have been someone else who was interested to speak about France as well. But we kind of joked. Yeah, I think this person want specifically about Paris. She joked that, I guess in my experience too, traveling, a lot of travelers like to let's say make fun of or put French down just because of the stereotype that they happen to be. So you're just saying that they're yeah, and it's not fair to do for anyone, but it is something unfortunately that happens a lot to Parisians or French people in general,
Yeah.
more than people might think, for sure. Unfortunately,
And I think that French people will say Paris isn't France, but I'm sure Parisians would very much dispute that. But I think that's true of any capital, isn't it? Your
Mm,
capital cities are just, I guess they amplify everything about a country in a small area. So it will have such a mix of everything about the nation in one small place that
mhm.
maybe, good and bad, it's all in there. And like any major city, there are social problems, and we're not going to run away from those social problems. So but yeah, if you asked our French neighbours, they would scoff at Parisians. But I've also got Parisian friends who would scoff at the province of France. And it's interesting that we call Provence an area down in the south of France, but Parisians might say anywhere outside of Paris is the provinces. So
All right, so we will speak more as far as more your connection as far as Paragon and Dordogne. But for now, is there anything else specifically that you like to add as far as things to do in that region or France in general before we move on?
No, I mean, I think Paris is a great city, and you can't visit France without experiencing Paris. My favorite museum is the Dorsey Museum. People always go to the Louvre, but go to the Dorsey Museum. I love that. But then come out of France and don't head to Nice or the Côte d'Azur, which is beautiful, but there are many other beautiful coastal areas in France. Almost the whole country has this massive coastline. And then go out into the countryside and rural France and visit some of the bigger cities like Bordeaux, which has this medieval heart. And there are cities with like Chartres with its great cathedral. Um, and go visit the website of the most beautiful villages in France. We once had a dream or a goal that we would visit every one of the plus beau village de France, so the most beautiful villages in France,
Mm,
because to get that rating, they have to have a national monument or a UNESCO site. And you'll go to them, and they're beautiful, protected villages. They are protected either because they're like listed castles or listed villages, So there are national monuments there, and there'll be very quaint little cafes and restaurants, and it will be in some places a little bit touristy, but often they have little walks that you can do, like an hour walk around the village. And so we used to have a camper van, and we'd go off around France, which is very, very camper van friendly. And we'd head to all of these beau villages. So they have a website with a map, and you can go and visit them. And there it is part in English. So if you're visiting an area of France, definitely go take a look at some of those villages. And even if you don't stay there, if you have a car, you might be able to go and visit 3 or 4 of them during your stay.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. Let's transition then. We're going to get to now know you more as a traveler. So some of the obviously background of your travels. For me, first, I'll just give a little context as far as places you've been overall. Obviously, we just talked a lot about France. So you've been to France, lived there as well. You're from the UK. You've obviously done a lot of Spain as well. But overall, you've done about 60 countries. I won't list them off, but 60 countries. I believe all the continents as well, 7 continents at this point, or?
Well, Jerry has done all the continents because he was a 10-pound pom. I don't know if you've heard of that expression. So
Oh, please explain.
in the 60s and 70s, but certainly the 60s, might have even started in the late 50s. Australia was a growing industrial nation, and they needed a workforce. And they sent out a scheme to, I have to say, sadly, white Europeans predominantly, saying poor Europeans as well. If you were poor and working class and your life was a bit hard in the UK, no chance of ever owning a house, always going to be on sort of treadmill working to support your family, come to Australia because we can offer you a better life. You can build yourself a home, and we have this land of opportunity and a better life and a better opportunity and better weather and better climate, and look at our beaches. And so they sold this dream to people whose lives were difficult in Europe. And in England, they were called POMs. And the word POM comes from because Britain very kindly sent all of its prisoners to Australia in colonial days. And so it's prisoner of Mother England, POMs. That's where that expression comes from.
Gotcha.
And so, but they did the same in Italy and France and Spain, where there was a mass immigration of working class people who could go and start a new life in Australia. And Jerry's family were amongst those that went. And it was £10. You could move your entire life to Australia and start again. But the dream and the reality, when you got there, for some people, it worked. My parents were going, and they'd applied to be 10-pound POMs, and my dad was going to go with his sister and her family. But my mum had been diagnosed with a incurable disease, and at the last minute, they were rejected. They didn't want to have that kind of burden on their system. But my aunt and uncle went and built an amazing life for them and their family in Perth in a way that they could never have had in the UK, certainly UK in the 50s and 60s, which was recovering, post-war Britain and before the boom. It was a difficult life for people. And Jerry's family, they also went. It didn't turn out so well for them. And he spent 6 months living in a tin hut in Adelaide, like a camp for the immigrants that had come that couldn't find work, had no money. There's a BBC TV program called 10-Pound POMs, if you get a chance to watch it. He said that was their life. But he was 10, so it was a big adventure for him. So he's been to Australia, and then on the way home, they managed to get a loan from a family member and buy themselves a ticket back to the UK after 6 months. And he visited on a slow boat around the world and through the Panama Canal. And so he had a great geography lesson. So that was a long answer to your question that I haven't been to Australia. But we are going, and we have our flight booked for July. So I will then have been to all 7 continents.
Fantastic. By the way, obviously, I think we've mentioned Jerry a little bit. Jerry is your husband, just for listeners and people
Yes,
wondering. Sorry.
he is.
Awesome though. Awesome. And obviously now, as you said from the start, you're currently in Siem Reap. You were in Laos before, so you're actively on your trip. Just from what I saw, like you plan to do it for a couple of years. How many months? How long has it been so far to this point?
Well, we actually started. We started mapping it the other day because we thought we should record what we've done in some way for ourselves. So we started in 2022, and we went to Jordan. And those first trips, we'd go for a month or so and then go home. We were both still working. I was still singing, and I was still walking. And it was definitely more of an extended holiday. And then in May 2023, we both retired. And that was kind of when we thought, okay, we'll travel continuously. And again, we still were in kind of holiday mode, in that we'd visit a place that is shifting the more we do it. And initially we would go home for maybe a week or two and then go off again. But since September last year, we kind of reached a point where we're not going home. And we have plans for certainly a couple more years. And it keeps growing. And when I say we have plans, we kind of have maybe a wish list and a seasonal wish list. So we kind of know where we should be in the world if we want to be there at the time that's right for us.
Obviously very cool and very just an awesome thing to be able to go and travel for pretty much indefinitely, or at least for a long extended period of time, but also having the freedom to kind of go with the flow with it as well, so to speak. So amazing. And I'm sure it's been great so far. I mean, I've seen, again, not to list all the places, but I know you mentioned Argentina, obviously. I think I saw Brazil. And then obviously now you're in Southeast Asia. So amazing for sure. I want to go back and talk a little bit more about the connections to France and even Spain. So I'll ask a few questions about that. About France. So I know, again, you've been on some other podcasts. So there was one podcast where you talked about why you moved there with Jerry, and how that was prompted by a lot of things that were kind of shifting at the time. I know Jerry had a health scare, and just kind of like the work, your business, and things that were changing. When you think back on when you actually made that move, what do you think that taught you guys, about yourselves and as a person and as a traveler?
I think at the time, we look back now, and it's difficult to look back in retrospect because we were 20 years younger when we made that decision. And I think your age and where you are in life affects how you make those decisions. I'm not sure that our 60-year-old selves would have made the decisions that our 40-year-old selves would have done. And in retrospect, it's also easy to look back and think about things that we never considered, that if we had, we may not have gone. But at the same time, we don't regret going. But so it's difficult when you look back, because you can't really get into the head of the person that made those choices at that time. I guess at the time it was an adventure, and you don't feel that you feel that you have a lot of life left in you. You feel that you have the ability to make other choices if this one doesn't work out. And as you get older, you realize that there isn't so much ahead of you. There's more behind you. So the way you make those decisions are different. At the time, we felt that we could have a better way of life, that we could spend more time with our family. And I think of all the things that we got from that move, the time that we had was definitely that, to step back. We both had businesses, we both worked long hours. And giving that up was scary, but at the same time was hugely liberating to get off of the treadmill of having the big house and the car and the foreign holidays and keeping up with that whole pace of life. We had this great life, but it comes at a cost. You have to pay for it in some way.
Hmm.
So we were able to step off of that, if you like.
No, yeah, that definitely makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And fair point. As you said, it was a while back. So, and even as you're traveling now, it might be hard to kind of think of that in retrospect, but it totally makes sense. Let's go back a little bit, even before that. Talk to me about Wicker's World. So TV show, yes. Why? So you that was a show you watched as a kid. Why did that inspire you as a kid? And how do you think that directly influenced your travels, if at all?
So Alan Wicker was a quintessential English gentleman. I don't know if you've looked him up at all, but was in the 60s and the early 70s. And as a child, certainly I would have been 10 or less. Little old black and white TV. There was a weekly program called Wicker's World, and Alan Wicker, with his white colonial outfit and his little hat and his frightfully posh English accent, he would travel the world to what to me, to the child of me, was so exotic. And the one place that for me I remember and maybe has planted that seed of traveling. So he went to Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. And to me, it felt like the most exotic place in the world. Now, given that this guy, it was colonial kind of English time, so his vision most probably was very different. And I don't remember the TV program at all, but I do remember this name, Rarotonga. And I knew that one day I'd have to go there. And I am going to go there when we go to Australia. So I've got
Mm.
my ticket booked already. And that planted a seed, I guess, for this curiosity of there's a world out there. And it wasn't Alan Wicker himself, but it was just the idea that, it's very hard to imagine in the 1960s and 70s, Australia was like traveling to the moon. It was a place where you just wouldn't go. I mean, there were very few commercial flights, but, working class people were not going to get on a plane and travel to Australia. It was like traveling to the moon, and there was no internet, obviously. There was just the TV programs that we could see and books. So the places that people talked about when you saw them felt so intriguing and adventurous and exotic that it was like reading a book and dreaming about being there. It was it's very difficult to try to imagine. I can't imagine. I don't know, maybe it's easier for younger people, or maybe it doesn't feel so urgent because everything is so accessible, and it wasn't then. But it planted a seed, and that child thought, I need to go to those places.
Okay, so then let's fast forward then from there to Spain. I mean, obviously you've done the Caminos, which we will talk about for sure. But you've been going to Spain for quite a while before even doing that. So take me back to 1985. I believe, I guess that was your first time to Spain.
It was, but I kind of heard about Spain beforehand. And I had an auntie who was a bit more adventurous than our family. And so whilst I was still at school, so it must have been in the late 70s, she went on this package holiday to the Costas, as we would call them, like the Costa del Sol or the Costa Blanca. And it also seemed quite exotic. It's crazy now in 2026 to think that in 1978 Spain felt like a really foreign place, but it was. And when I started work, the idea that I could travel to these places in Europe was so exciting. We could have our 2 weeks holiday and get a flight, which was scary but exciting at the same time. And so um, she's talked about Spain, and that became a place that I wanted to go and visit. And so the first opportunity I had, we went to Spain, and I loved it. We went to Andalusia, and I just fell in love with Spain. And I think I have lost count of how many times I visited Spain. And Spain is definitely not the costas on the Mediterranean coast. And a lot of people, that's what they see of Spain. And don't get me wrong, there are some beautiful beaches, and people will go and have a really great holiday in the costas and that Mediterranean coast. But if you go half an hour in from that really built up, busy area, you will find a different Spain. And that's the Spain that I love. And I think Spain, a bit like France, holds on to its regional identities and culture and cuisine and festivals. And again, it's not a perfect country, but oh my goodness, it is a beautiful, beautiful country.
Awesome. Yeah, to your point, like I mentioned my first trip being France. I actually went to Spain as well for my first ever backpacking trip. So spent 2 months in each spot. So specifically Barcelona, but definitely a good time. And I've been lucky enough to go back quite a few times since. So can definitely.
And a lot of people, their first visit to Spain is Barcelona. I think it's because the airport and a lot of cruise ships stop there. And haven't been to Barcelona in some time. My first time was about 85, 86, and the cathedral was still a long way from being finished.
Yeah.
And it was nowhere near as busy as it is now. And interesting, actually, I think the last time I was there, I had a 3-day gig
Ah,
singing on one
yeah.
of the super yachts in their harbour, which was a whole different story and a different experience. But Barcelona is super, super busy these days, and it is one of the places in the world that is maybe over tourists. And it's interesting. I read forums about the Camino, and a lot of people say, "Oh, Spain doesn't want tourists," and that isn't true. But I get that over tourism is creating a problem for communities in Spain, and I guess quite rightly, people get a bit upset. And I don't think that they should go around squirting water pistols at
Yeah.
tourists. But I think we as tourists need to be listening and trying to minimize that impact. And Spain is huge. It's got a lot to offer. There are many, many other places. So if you're thinking of heading to Spain, Barcelona is amazing, and yeah, go there for a day if you want. But there are some amazing places in the interior that are worth visiting. And you can hire a car because it's super, super quiet roads and easy to drive as well.
Very true. Okay, and then from there, actually kind of you spoke on it some. Fast forward to 2013 in Spain, and that's when you discovered the Pilgrims as you were driving about, and I guess first learned about the Camino. Um, Before we fully jump into the Camino, I do want to ask though, because obviously you mentioned earlier, right? Like you did the research, and then you saw it was a how long of a walk for that first one? 800.
800 kilometers, 500 miles.
Ah, thank you. I
Like
was
the
just gonna
song, I will walk.
I was just gonna say I'll do the conversion later for any American listeners, even myself, kilometers. But so with that, and even before that, you said, oh, I can go for a walk. I'm curious, especially as well. Obviously, you mentioned you had cancer at the time, and this was, I guess, a few years removed from this point, right? Like, and I know you did. You said you had to do some training for that first Camino, but even before that, like because going for a walk in general is one thing. Were you were you as far as like any form of physical fitness, was that something that was sort of left field as far as going to, and mind you, like I'm one who likes to work out things like this, so but doing a Camino, that is next level for sure. So just in general, like was this completely opposite of what you were, I guess, as a person from a physical sense before doing this at all? Or does that make sense?
Absolutely. Nobody thought I would do it. Nobody. In fact, maybe a week before I left home to walk, I had a wedding gig and with my old band, and one of them let slip that they had recorded when they thought I would quit. And I quizzed them more, and it's like, you guys have actually got a book running of when I'm going to quit, how soon, and you're actually betting on that.
Mm.
So nobody believed. It was so out of my comfort zone. I had finished my treatment and I was well, but I wasn't. I look back and think I wasn't actually 100% well at that point. I was still trying to find the best way to recover after all of the treatment. I mean, physically, health wise, it was all fine. I had to have a bit of a medical before I went for my doctor to prescribe me with enough drugs to keep me going. But generally, my fitness as far as the cancer, that wasn't an issue. But I was really overweight. I still, I'm not a thin, skinny girl, but I was very much overweight. I've been on steroids and antibiotics for a year or more. And I had never walked with a backpack before. I had never done a multi-day hike. I had never walked 20 kilometers in my life. And yet I set off. And my husband Joe was like, bye then. But we hadn't been apart for that long ever in our history. So everything about it was alien. I'm also, I don't like yucky things. And I am a bit of a princess. I eat vegetarian food a lot of the time because I'm really fussy with meat. And I don't like cows or dogs that run at me or bees. I am so not your classic
Those are those are
hiker.
fair. Those are fair, by the way. Random dogs and bees. That's fair.
I am just the wrong person to be doing this. And I was 51. So, but there was a confidence in me that knew I was going to do it. Maybe it was a naivety and not a confidence.
But sometimes though that can work in one's favor for sure. So, and you kind of you kind of said it too, like, or I know you said it in the past. Again, I know you had the cancer and stuff, but for you, it wasn't. You said it wasn't really spiritual for your decision to do it. Really, it was really just you felt like a confidence and maybe even showing up to friends who were making bets. I don't know if that was just like, oh, I can do this, show them, prove them wrong. Is that correct? Is that fair to say?
And they were doing that. That was never part of my, it wasn't to prove to anybody else. I learned about that retrospectively, if you like, or as it got to the point of no return when I was going. But that wasn't ever part of that decision. I think, it's very difficult. I'm not a religious person, but I did grow up in the family of a church. And actually, when my mum was really sick, being in that church and being with people who would look out for me and my sister, it was a community for which I'm very grateful. I don't know what I believe in. I'm kind of keeping an open mind on that. And I think the more I walk the Camino, the more spiritual for sure I do become, the more I feel that there is serendipity and coincidence and things that happen that you can't explain. And also I meet people with such faith that maybe a little bit of their inspiration or their aura kind of rubs off on you. I don't know what that is. And also through travel, we meet people from all kinds of cultures and religions. And there's a common theme with all of it. And I guess that common theme would be more spiritual than anything else. And so I kind of keep an open mind. I'm open to all sorts, but that was not part of my decision making in 2013. It was just, I'm going to do this. Now, a lot of people will say that you're called to walk the Camino. And I'm not going to argue with that. I didn't feel that. It wasn't like, it's a religious pilgrimage. But I know for some people, they will say, yeah, you don't think that, but that's what happened. And, I'm open to that. For me, I felt I was alive. It was an adventure. There's also, I think for some people, I was getting close to kind of the empty nest age. You know, our children were growing up. I didn't have my business. And so maybe the idea of this middle aged, overweight woman going on an adventure was also part of that decision making of like, I need to add some excitement into my life. I need an adventure. You know, I could have died and now I need to make something of my life and do something. I think that was part of my thinking as well. And I think maybe that's true for a lot of people. They think there has to be more than just getting up and going to work. I want one of those adventures too. I want to be part of that.
Yeah. No, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. All right. We before we move on and jump fully into Camino, is there anything else you'd like to add as far as yourself as a traveler and the things we mentioned so far for this section?
It's kind of out of sync with it, but in the same way that I would say to somebody who is coming to visit France or wants to visit France or wants to visit Spain, or like us wants to travel the world, there is so much misinformation online, and so don't use one source of the internet for information. Do research beforehand, but don't be put off by some of the stuff that you read online. And if you're going to France or you're going to Spain, don't stick to Barcelona or Paris. Do hire a car, because the rural roads are actually really easy to navigate. Spain has the most incredible bus and coach network and an incredible train network. And so you don't even need to hire a car to visit some of Spain's amazing cities. Everybody's heard of Barcelona, but very few people will go to Salamanca, which has one of the oldest university cities in the world, or Merida, which has almost more Roman ruins than Rome. So don't stick to what when I'm traveling, I use UNESCO and World Heritage sites to have a look at some lesser known sites that I may have missed or not heard of. And I definitely recommend, if you're going to France or Spain or traveling, to do that kind of research beforehand. So yeah, I guess that would be the one thing I would say to people is, don't feel that you can't do it, but don't just stick to the obvious tourist places. I think I wandered off track there. So
No. That's first totally fine, and definitely great advice. Excuse me. Yeah, because a lot of people, I feel like, do just go to the main spots, and for whatever reason they might not have any idea of other places and whatnot. So it's definitely a good thing to, whether you do the research beforehand, or hopefully you're in a position where you get to a place and you're able to find out, whether through other people or if you're at a hotel or whatever, the staff are nice enough to share some things. Yeah, definitely good to get off the beaten path and explore things that are lesser known and not as visited, for sure. So thank you for that. Let's transition now then to your main topic. So, of course, walking the Camino, and then also older, independent, slow traveling for older travelers. First, with the Camino, I'll kind of set this up a bit. So, you've done more than 20 Caminos. I believe you're about to do your 25th or 24th.
24th, yeah.
24th. So that covers thousands of kilometers across Spain, of course. So what is it about the Camino, like the infrastructure, the culture, the people, that you feel makes it so unique? And how has your relationship with the Camino changed over time?
Okay, so I think all of the things that you mentioned, the culture, the people, the history, the significance, the ease of traveling, all of those things makes the Camino accessible. So a lot of people have said to me, would you want to do something like the PCT or the Appalachian Trail? And I'm like, oh no, I'm quite happy through hiking, but I don't want to carry a tent and all my food. And also, there are bears and snakes and all kinds of dangerous things on those trails. So I guess the Camino and other trails like the Camino, and there are plenty in Europe, they're kind of like through hiking light, if you like. They give people an experience of what it is like to do that kind of hiking, but without having to go all in, which is kind of for people like me in the middle ground who think, oh, I like that. I like a walk. I'll have a go, but I don't want to be out there with the bears and the real, I admire people who do that. I wish I was that person, but I know I'm just not. So for me, the Camino, like say, it was there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do that, and there was never any doubt in my mind I was going to do that. A lot of people think when they think of the Camino, they think of one trail, and they think of actually the Camino Frances, which starts in the Pyrenees or a little town just the other side of the Pyrenees in France and goes to Santiago de Compostela. That's the classic 800-kilometer walk. The film The Way, that's what they walked about. Pablo Coelho's book, he talks about that. Shirley MacLaine's book, it's all about the Camino Frances. And so most people, when they say, I'm going to walk the Camino, that is the route that they're talking about. But actually, there are many, many routes and many different Caminos through Spain, through Europe, where historically people would have traveled from their home to get to Santiago. And so whilst I've done 23, they haven't all been on the Frances. And Spain is a very diverse country. There are mountains and there are plains and there's history and different cultures within the country. So when you walk the northern coastal Camino, it's going to be very, very different than the walk from Seville, which is littered with Moorish and Roman history. And so there are different routes to suit different personalities and different styles. And so the one thing, I guess, that ties them all together is the ease of doing that. Camino is important to Spanish people. There are little accommodation, albergues, bunk beds, hostels every 20 or 30 kilometers. You can walk even the most remote walks, and they are marked with arrows, and there is accommodation, and the trail is going to be there, and there is a local Friends of the Camino or an online community who will help you. So more than, I guess that's true of the classic American hikes as well, but it's very easy for people to come to Spain and find a trail that speaks to them, whether you want somewhere remote and quiet or busy and fully serviced. And so it's the ease and that history. I mean, so much history. Do you know there is a place on the Camino Frances just outside of Burgos where they have discovered some of the oldest humanoid settlements? They're 900,000 years old. That's almost 1,000,000 years of history. And in Burgos, which you walk through, there's a museum dedicated to it called the Museum of Human Evolution, which is really worth visiting. But you can also go and visit that site in Atapuerco, and archaeologists will show you what they've been finding. And on other Camino routes, there are caves like the ones near where I live in France of prehistoric history and cave paintings. And there is so much Neolithic history and Celtic history, especially around Galicia. You can walk through Roman ruins, and if you love history, Spain has kind of got all of it. It's like that, and it's preserved. Maybe the climate has helped preserve some of that, but if you're a history lover, and the history of James himself and St. James, the Romans were in Padron in Galicia and in a little place called Iria Flavia, and that's where James is said to have lived and preached. And that's why his body was taken there after he was beheaded in in the Holy Land. So there's Christian history, there's Moorish history, there's Roman history, there's Neolithic history, there's everything in Spain. It's an incredible, rich country.
Before we carry on, rather, I know we're coming up to 90 minutes. Are you okay with time?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, perfect. Same here. Just want to
Okay.
double check and make sure. I know maybe you had a tour or something going on, but perfect. Talk to me a little bit about, you kind of mentioned, as far as on the Camino, every 20, 30 miles or so, or kilometers, whatever it is, there's a place, there's a place to stay for sleeping and such. Talk to me a little bit more about sort of the day-to-day reality of actually walking the Camino. So, again, you mentioned sleeping arrangements, but just like food, getting through the day, and maybe some of the things that surprised you about that as well.
I think what to expect will depend on the type of route that you've chosen. So we have walked some routes where we never saw another person. We were totally on our own. And so the Via de la Plata, which is the one that starts in Seville and goes through all the Roman history along the route. When we walked that, we maybe saw a handful of people each day, but obviously you carry everything on your back. There's no luggage transfer service. You need to take your food and your drink. And then, it was September when we started. So you're starting off with 3 liters of water because you may not find a water source, and it's hot. So on that walk, you have to be prepared to carry everything on your back. And some of the days, are 20, some of the days are 30 kilometers. So I think that's 20 miles for you. So it is a tougher walk. And for that reason, it is definitely one of the trails that is less walked. It is for people who are really serious about wanting to find a trail and carry everything. But not every trail has to be like that. And the Camino Frances, which is the most popular, you can go every 5 or 6 kilometers. You can walk for an hour and find a village with a cafe and services. And accommodation has sprouted all along the route. And there are albergues, which is just the Spanish word for hostel, if you like. But they're pilgrim hostels aimed at pilgrims. So you need your little credential card with the stamps in it. And you turn up, and they are run by the local community or the local government. And they often will give people a bunk bed for around 8 to 10 euros a night. Yes, typical hostel, simple accommodation. You can do hand washing, you share bathrooms and showers, and they're often run by volunteers. And I've volunteered and gone and worked in those albergues. And they're great. It's a great way to meet pilgrims, but that is not for everyone. Jerry is not going to stay in a bunk bed. He wants his own bathroom. So then you've got another layer on top of that accommodation, which is a private albergue. Tends to be a little bit more expensive, tends to be a little bit nicer. The rooms might be smaller. You're not in a big hall. You might be in a room with just six bunks in it. One bathroom to less people. You might have sheets on your bed and not have to sleep in a sleeping bag. And some of them have private rooms where you still share a bathroom, but at least you get your own bedroom. It's my favourite kind of accommodation. And then obviously from there, you've got little small rural bed and breakfast type accommodation, some of it aimed at tourists, some of it aimed at pilgrims, which is very simple. And it can go all the way up to a Spanish parador, which are converted heritage buildings that have been turned into luxury hotels. Along the Camino Frances, you will find all of those choices. And a lot of people, traditional pilgrims, berate this change. But actually, I really love the fact that whoever you are, there is a Camino for you. If you don't have a lot of money, you can stay in the municipal albergues if you're happy to do that. If you have a bit more, or you're prepared to pay a bit more for some comfort, you can still do that. if you don't want to carry a rucksack every day, there are luggage transport companies who will move your bag for you every day. If you need a bathroom every hour, you will find a cafe. If you only want to walk 10 kilometers a day, you can do that. And I know there's this huge debate online about, are they pilgrims or are they tourists? And I think it doesn't matter, because they're walking a pilgrimage route and they're learning from that, and they're having that experience, and they're walking with people from around the world, and they're learning about that pilgrimage and having that opportunity, which I feel is only a good thing.
As you were sharing that, and you kind of answered my question or follow up with that. So it is, regardless of obviously the sleeping arrangements, the restaurants and whatnot. Um, Regardless of someone's level with the Camino, pretty much you're only going to run into somebody who is at least in some form walking the Camino, right? Does that make sense? So like if you're staying at a specific place, it's not going to be, and not that it really matters, but it's not going to be just like, if I showed up in Spain, it's like, oh, this hostel seems like a good hostel. Let me go up but I have no plan to do the Camino. Like, does that, or maybe it's different depending on which walks you do, but is it something like that as well sometimes?
If you go the private albergues, and certainly in the cities, some of the hostels are just tourist hostels, and
Mm.
they are not specifically pilgrim orientated. There is, for example, I know of a hostel in the city of Leon, and I have taken my groups there if we're staying in bunk beds, because it's a really excellent hostel. But it isn't solely aimed at pilgrims, although lots of pilgrims will use it because it's such a great hostel. But there are also hostels that are run by the local church or the local municipal council, or there are also Friends of the Camino groups. So, like the English Confraternity of St. James runs a really beautiful hostel in the mountains around Osabrero in northern Spain. And they used to have afternoon tea every day for pilgrims. But for that, you have to turn up on foot. You have to be carrying your own bag, and you have to be a pilgrim. So there are some that are exclusively for the pilgrim community, and some of them, there's a tiny little albergue, Camino de Frances, which is run by Italian monks, and there are only 12 beds. And when pilgrims arrive, the monks wash your feet as as a form of a humble kind of humility and sacrifice, I guess, and welcome. But there are beautiful experiences to be had that are exclusively for pilgrims who are walking a pilgrimage, without a doubt. But if that's not you, there are other albergues, and some of them still have communal meals and a sense of community. And again, my sort of thing would be, you may not turn up at those places as a pilgrim, but you might get to the end and think, or you might have a few days of an experience and think, I want to do more of this. I want this simple life of just getting up and walking and meeting other people and sharing a meal with a stranger. And I always say the word in France for friend is copain. My son told me this, and I never thought about it before. It means with whom I break bread.
Mm.
Copain, because pain is bread in French. So
It's
it's,
funny.
you're my
took
friend if
French.
I share my bread with you.
Yeah, I took French, and I took French, so I understand. But as you're breaking it down, it's like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I never thought of that. And what a great way to think of a friend as somebody that you would sit down with and share a meal. And as pilgrims, whatever people want to have that word mean, but that community will often sit down and eat together. And for me, that is one of the joys, that it doesn't matter who you are, where you've come from, what your faith is, what your nationality is, or how rich or poor you are, or even what age you are. We all sit down and we eat together, and we all have the same issues, like We needed a bathroom. We have blisters. We got sunburnt. We're too hot. We're too cold. What have you?
Yeah.
We are sharing that experience, and all the rest of it is just noise. We just become about that experience.
Hmm. What would you say? And you can speak for you specifically, but like time of the year, because I guess they're, I don't know if they're all year round, but what time of the year is best or ideal to go? When do you go? And then I feel like there was something else I had, but yeah, what time of the year would you suggest to go, or and what time do you go?
So I have walked in March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December.
Wow.
I've walked
So it is year
around
round.
the. I have not walked in January or February. I think it really depends again what route you choose and what you're looking for.
Mm,
I have walked out of season when it's either been when I've been working and it was the only time I had, and I was happy for some alone time. So, like when my father died, I really just wanted to go and walk, and it was November into December. I wasn't looking for a community experience. I just wanted to walk. Um, I've taken a group in October on the Française, which is traditionally very busy. And we were surprised at the end of October how quiet the trail was. So, if you want the classic Camino experience, but you don't want the crowds, avoid September and May, which are super busy on the Camino. Those are historically the most busy times. But it's changing. 500,000 people claimed their Compostela last year in Santiago. And that's just a record of the number of people that turned up at the pilgrim office to get their certificate. I would say that at least 50% more were walking and didn't claim, and maybe more. So there's a lot of people, and the peak times are May and September. And so people are starting to walk in November and October and March and April.
mm,
The disadvantage with walking outside of that busy time is that some of the accommodation isn't open. A lot of the private accommodation is closed. The cafes close. The hotels will close. The Camino Frances, the popular one, there is a winter accommodation. A lot of the municipal albergues will stay open. Not
mm,
all of the hotels close because some of the places that you visit are year round. Like Porto in Portugal, that's a year round resort. It's not going to be closed.
yeah.
But there are more difficulties. You have to be a bit more self sufficient. You're not going to find a cafe every, hour or two. um, Also in July and August, it is definitely hot. And we took a decision a couple of years ago to just stop walking at that time of year. And if you're used to the heat, that is fine. But we were just getting burnt, and it's not safe to be out walking when it's 36, 37 degrees. I don't think it's healthy. Some people are used to it and they're like, oh, I'm fine, but we were withering for sure. And I volunteered in August last year when the temperatures in Spain were pushing 40 degrees. And, pilgrims were having to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to beat the heat. And so you're walking in the dark,
Yeah.
and your whole day is about getting there before the sun is at its hottest. So
Mm,
I think seasonally, weather is the biggest consideration. And the more you get into winter, the mountain passes are going to have snow on them. The Napoleon route on the Camino between France and Spain is the only hiking trail in Europe that legally closes from the 31st of October to the 1st of April. And if you go and need rescuing, you have to pay for that service because they say the weather is too unpredictable in the mountains. And other places, there's a lot of rain in some places. So the popular months are popular for a reason, but
sure.
they're busy.
Trade-offs for sure, but that makes sense. And I should add, I know you have a course, so if there's some sauce that you don't want to share, that's totally fine too. But
No, no, that's fine. That's fine.
I remember my follow-up, and you kind of touched on it when you said sometimes pilgrims are waking up at 4 in the morning to beat the heat. I guess from how I understand, you can walk it sort of to your own pacing, but especially when it comes to if you're doing it not necessarily solo, but if you're doing it versus doing it with the group, talk a little bit about how, like, the pacing dynamics with that, if that makes sense. How it's different, and if you really do have to kind of follow a timeline, or if that makes sense.
I think there are all kinds of people that will walk. So for a lot of people, like, we're retired, and so the time frame is not an issue for us. But for a lot of people, they either have Schengen limits within 90 days, or they're working and they have to be back by a certain date, or their family commitments, or they just can't afford to go away for 6 weeks and walk at leisure. So there are a myriad of reasons why people have to have a start and an end date.
Mm-hmm.
And for those people, the best way, well, no, it's not the best way. There are two options. Just walk, see how you get on, deal with everything that comes your way. And I've done that, and that is one way of walking. But for other people, that is too much
Mm-hmm.
relying on fate. If they know they've got a flight to catch at the end and they want to get to Santiago, those people will want to plan something. And I would say that's also fine. Plan something that allows you to have a bit of flexibility in that plan. But planning is absolutely fine. I'm a planner. I plan everything. I love a spreadsheet. I go into detail. I like to find the best choice of accommodation, and I like to know what I'm going to see en route. So, but I equally will change that plan even on a daily basis. um, so if you're the sort of person that has a flight and you have an end date, you can plan and you can book your accommodation ahead. And also you can say, I only want to walk 15 kilometers a day. Although I was in that camp when I first started, and most people will surprise themselves by how far they can actually walk when all you've got to do from dawn to dusk is walk. So I would say to people, you might think you're a 8 mile a person, 8 mile a day kind of person. But I suspect when you're out there on the trail, you might actually be able to do 50% more than what you think. So allow for that in your planning. But I lost the thread. You asked about planning and times, distances and how far you need to travel. Oh, and a group dynamic. Sorry, I
Yeah.
ramble.
Mhm. Oh, that's
The
okay.
group dynamic is different, and again, it depends on the group. So I have my walking club and I take groups. And if you are traveling with a group, you have no choice but to plan where people are going to sleep, because I cannot guarantee I'm going to turn up and find 4 or 5 rooms. So I have to plan. And people that are coming with me want the satisfaction of knowing I've got a bed when I reach my endpoint.
Mhm.
But for my groups, I'm a strong believer in that people, we're all grown ups. We get up when we want to get up, and we
Mhm.
stop when we want to have lunch, and we get into the hotel when we get into the hotel. I feel as though I might facilitate the walk, and I'm there to give a helping hand. And I'm there to tell people what not to miss and what they might like to see, but it's their walk. And I am not leading that group, because then they're just having my experience and they need to have their own. I want
Mhm.
them to go and meet other people and walk with other people. And very often the group will pair up and people will have a little group within a group, but they can
Yeah.
do their thing because it's not my walk. It's theirs. I'm just helping them. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they lack a bit of confidence and they like knowing that there's somebody there if they need them. But certainly with my walks, I think people should be free to do their own thing. A lot of people book self-guided walks where it's a company will plan everything for them and then they just set off every day. And that walks too, because it takes the stress out of you finding your bed, but you are fixed into that time frame. I know when I'm taking my groups what days are difficult and what aren't, and I can make allowances for that. If you're a first timer, you might think, well, that day is only 20 kilometers and your provider will book you for 20 kilometers, but it's 20 kilometers that are like this and you
Mhm.
struggle. So I would say, if you are using a company to plan your route, be honest with them about your limitations on more difficult terrain. And if you don't want to plan, then that's also fine. If you want to do it slowly, choose one of the more popular routes where you know you can break stages and have accommodation as you go. And if you really don't want to plan, avoid May and September because they are super busy and everything will be booked.
You really have to plan then. That makes sense. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers my questions with there. Is there anything else you'd like to add? I'm sure there's a lot. Is there anything else you'd like to add with the walking the Camino in general before we move on to the older independent slow travel?
Right. I think for me, and I've probably said it, but I love the Camino community and I love the pilgrim community, and I'm passionate about all things Camino. But there is an element of one-upmanship that I don't love. And there is an element in some online communities that has an edge to
Mm.
it that is really not what the Camino is about. And I have people who find themselves, they sort of stumble into my group or they'll find my workshop or my little Facebook group. And they're at the point of giving up on doing it because they don't believe they can. And I've walked with many people who have reached that point. It's like, oh, I really want to walk the Camino, but I don't think I'm the right sort of person. You know, I can't afford all the gear, or I can't walk 30 kilometers a day. And, the purists have their Camino and they have their point. But I believe that we can all gain something from walking as a community. And if you can't afford to spend a couple of thousand on super light gear, bring an old sports bag and go in your ordinary outdoor gear and have your bag transported for a week. And if you can only do it for a week, trust me, you'll still get something from that week. And don't let that
Mhm.
community that has that edge put you off, because I do believe that we can all get something really valuable from being a community. And I really find it sad that some people feel that it's not for them for whatever reason, because I believe it is for everyone.
Actually, yeah, talk about that a little bit. Like, what kind of people have you seen on the Camino? So obviously, like yourself, um, your words, you're a bit older, senior. Have you seen? I've actually met some people in my travels who've done the Camino. For whatever reasons there were. So I was, heard about it before. Actually, on my first trip going back to Barcelona and France and all that. But he was a bit younger, so maybe like early to mid 20s, for example. So yeah, talk about some of the ages of people that you've met and seen over the years, and then maybe even a little bit of some of the stories as far as their backstory and maybe why they were doing the Camino as well, if you don't mind.
No, I mean, so many people. The youngest person that I have met walking solo was a 16-year-old boy, young man from Denmark. He was really tall, actually. So, he didn't look 16. And at the time, my son was 15. And I was thinking, I cannot imagine
Mm.
letting him go wandering on his own with a rucksack through rural Spain. He beat me into Rabanal, the English afternoon tea hostel, and he sort of skipped in and took the last bed in front of me. But I met him a few times on the trail, and that was fine. He is a very nice young man. The oldest person that I have met and walked with, I met a lady. It was over the Pyrenees. I don't know if you've seen the film The Way, but he sits under the statue of a Madonna up in the mountains, looking out at the snowy hills. And I met a lady at that point, and it had been raining a lot, so it was very muddy underfoot. And I lent her an arm to get over the slippery, boggy part of the trail. And she was 84. She had a
Mm.
little pack on her back. She wasn't carrying everything, but she still had a pack on. And that was her 25th or 24th Française.
Mhm.
And for me, I was like, okay, that gives me hope. I've got another 20 years of doing this. So, I know that there are older people who have walked and finished the Camino. So, like the complete spectrum. But I've also met parents pushing children in buggies and carrying children in rucksacks, and you meet toddlers and young children walking. So it's definitely something that families also do. Age is not a barrier to walking the Camino. And then even, I've met people from around the world, which is fascinating because then I was volunteering in the pilgrim office in San John, and I met a guy from South Korea. And I try and always say to people wherever they're from, oh, I've been there, or I know that, to make them feel welcome. And I said, I want to go to Korea because there's a trail in Korea called Jeju. And he said, I live on Jeju. And so he gave me his phone number. And this was last April. He said, when you come, I'll walk with you on Jeju. So that gives me a reason to go. So you meet people from all around the world, all faiths, all religions, no faith, all ages, all budgets, and all coming for different reasons. So I've met people. I met a Dutch guy once who was walking. He was young. We called him the Viking. He was typically Scandinavian or North European, tall, blonde hair, beard, solidly built. So his nickname became the Viking. But he said, I'm walking because I don't know whether to move house. He said, it's expensive where I live in Amsterdam. I've got a tiny room in a shared house. And we said to him at the end, I think you should stay in your tiny house. Every time we turned up at an albergue, he'd choose the bunk bed right in the corner and make himself this little cozy corner. And we said, I think you really love being in a small space. And he's like, yeah, that's right. I do. So I think he stayed in his little shared house. But I've met people walking with cancer and actually walking with their drug machines, self-administering. I met one lady who lost her husband and son in a road accident and didn't know what to do, so grabbed a bag and just decided to walk. I've walked with people who, only last year walked with somebody who only days before had lost a close family member, and although their Camino was planned, it became part of their grieving process, if you like, part of their healing and coming to terms with the enormity of what's going on in life. You meet young people who are doing it as part of a bucket list experience, a lot of older, middle-aged people who are at a transition in their own life. And I think that says a lot about the world we live in. We don't know how to transition sometimes from one part of our life into the next. And sometimes there's so much noise in our life and we're so concerned with the speed and the politics and the finance and everything that happens that we forget how to find some space and the joy of just walking every day as the days passed, it's almost like everything just slips away and you start to hear your own voice. And for me, that is part of it, that it's for everyone. I've met everyone. People don't even know why they're walking sometimes and end up answering questions or leaving behind something because finally we have some space.
Yes, as you said, the space to do some inner reflection, maybe, or however, whatever it means to the person, obviously, of course. You mentioned specifically like the Korean fellow who's invited you for the walk there, and I know you mentioned you've done some walks outside of the Camino as well. So I'm actually curious, maybe some that you've already done, and also like, are they also, I guess, like similarly structured, or were some of those kind of just free form, if you will, and kind of figure it out as you go?
So we did the Kimono Kodo in Japan, which is jeweled. It's another UNESCO World Heritage walk. And that's very similar to the Camino. There are little houses and not so much dormitory-based accommodation, but it is a route. And we did the Nakasachi route, which is a bit like the Francaise. It's the one that most people walk. There are others that aren't. There's also the 88 Temples walk, which is a little bit like the Camino, much tougher walk, Again, there are hostels and accommodations and a trail that makes it easier and accessible, but you have to be fit to do that sort of walk. The Jeju Wally is another such walk in Korea, also twinned with the Camino. But we've done a lot of day hiking as well. So we've walked part of the Jordan Trail, but we stayed in accommodation and then walked. There are some places on the Jordan Trail, for example, a place called Dana, where they will transport, the Bedouins will drive your bags to the next hotel, and then you can stay there at that hotel and they'll move it forward. I think one of the great things now is that a lot of walks that used to be only for backpackers who will sleep in a tent and carry everything, there are companies, local community-based projects, as well as the big companies who will help you organize bag transport and accommodation and even walk as a group. One of the walks that I really wanted to do and wish I had done it when it first came onto my radar, because now I don't know if it will ever happen. There's a walk called the Ibrahim Trail, which was organized in Palestine by locals who wanted to show a side to Palestine, the community, the Bedouin, the community-based projects. And they created this trail called Abraham's Trail, basically. And it was about 2018. I was going to do it. The timing wasn't right because I wanted to walk it in spring when it would be cooler and there'd be all the flowers. I hope one day I get to do that. In America, we did a lot of hiking around Washington and Mount Rainier, Skyline Trail. That was amazing. Canada, we've done some hiking, a lot of day hiking that are on trails, but we've chosen to do sections of it. And all over the world, there are trails that you can walk.
That's amazing. And it's wild to think, yeah, I guess back in like 2013 or so, this it's like, hey, let's just try this out because why not? And now it's turned into all of this, and I'm sure more in the future for you as well. It's great. It's amazing, amazing. Let's transition into our next topic. So older, independent, slow travelers. So of course, with walking, I'm sure walking, and you mentioned, of course, your 8 kilo bag. So I'm sure walking teaches you that very quickly that you don't really need as much as you think, right? Uh, how did that mindset carry over into your travels now? And you can maybe speak a bit more on like what are some of the essentials that you take and what are you able to fit in your 8 kilo bag?
I've got my bag here. You want to have a look at it?
Nice. Is that a Kelty?
It is a Gossamer Gear Gorilla.
Gotcha.
It isn't the bag I hike with. I have to say, I use an Osprey for hiking. I find that pack sits too much on my back, doesn't have the airflow, makes me hot. I'm a bit of a sweater, so it's not ideal for me. But for traveling, and I think it's one of the most popular bags on some of the classic American through hikes because it's super light. So I think the bit about how the Camino has kind of informed our travel and the whole thing about needing less. A lot of people say when they have finished the Camino, whether you carry and have a bag forwarded or whether you carry it on your back, but I guess more so if it's on your back, you become very aware of what you actually need and what you want. And you realize very quickly that even something that you think, oh, that's quite small, that's only 200 grams or an ounce or what have you, very quickly those ounces add up. And when you're carrying it and you pick it up and you think, okay, no, I need to get rid of something. And so over the years, I have invested in more expensive gear. I know that is, if you're going to walk for the first time or travel even on one trip, you're not going to spend that kind of money for that. And if you're that person, then don't. Have your bag forwarded or have a luggage checked. You don't need to spend huge sums of money on technical gear, which is really expensive. But we have learned to shop around, find the sales, and limit ourselves to what we take. So there are two reasons why we stick to the 8 kilos. One is I'm terrified that I'm going to lose my bag, that I'm going to check a luggage and I'm going to lose it. I'm tall, so we're in Asia. Nothing I could buy in the shops here would fit me. I can't replace my clothes. I'm tall. I am not petite. So I spend a long time shopping for the clothes that I buy. And I really, really don't want to lose those things. So that's number one. Vanity, bit of a princess. Please don't make me wear things I don't want. And secondly, it is a fear of losing a bag if you ship it. Without doubt, luggage gets lost and luggage gets damaged. And if we're traveling months on end, I don't want to have to deal with that. And thirdly, the other reason is, and somebody summed it up recently, another traveller, and I like it. Nothing touches the ground with us. We put our pack on as soon as we get off the plane and it's on our back. We don't put it down anywhere. We don't leave it anywhere. We can walk with that pack on our back. It's 8 kilos. I have to say, this year there has been a shift in airlines. And people joked in Europe, like with the Ryanair and EasyJets, that they were super strict on their luggage. We have found it is happening across the board with airlines, that they have lowered that limit to 7 kilos. And that's causing us a real problem. And I read that it is because we are all bringing carry-on and we are stopping planes from leaving on time, or stopping planes from emptying that, because everybody's going on with big bags. They're bringing on too much. There isn't space for it. So then they're having to have it put in the hold, and it's become a major problem for airlines, and they're trying to stop us doing that. But I would say, okay, we'll make it better for us to check. Stop losing our bags, stop damaging our bags. But so we are down to 8 kilos plus a small underseat bag, and we're finding that we can't do the 7 kilos, so our bag still fits, and so we're just paying for an extra bag. But we're still in that principle of 8 kilos on our back, nothing touches the ground, and the size of your bag is really important, under 55 centimeters. And I noticed I wanted to buy a new Osprey, and their rucksacks are all 56 centimeters or above, which means I can't use even the smallest one on carry-ons. Why have you done that? Why have you changed the size? So that was a big lesson for walking the Camino, but also for traveling. We don't want to take a lot. I still have, 5 pairs of trousers and different outfits, and I can buy something when we're on the road. And I don't think it's clothes that take a lot. I don't carry lots of makeup and toiletries, so that's not an issue. I do have to carry medicine and medication. I am autoimmune, and I take medicine every day, and I can't eat gluten. So there's that. And most people, as they get older, will have some kind of medication. So that's a weight in itself in your bag, and it's a non-negotiable. We also, I'm talking to you on our laptop. We take a laptop. We've got mobile phones, electronics that go with the mobile phones. So we have had to search and research for the best way to bring gear that's light, the lightest laptop that doesn't get too hot or isn't too heavy or isn't too expensive, because some of them are super expensive. And that whole traveling light has informed the choices that we make, but also I think it spreads into your own world. We don't need to buy souvenirs. We don't need to buy stuff. We don't need to take anything home, because I've got photos and memories. And in our house, we've really streamlined the things that we need, and we stopped buying. In 2020, like many people, we emptied our attic. We went up and we cleared all of our stuff, because most people were bored and they thought, okay, we'll just do this. And we were horrified at how much waste, how much wonderful stuff we found that we just put up there because, oh, we'll just put it in the attic for now. And we were ashamed that we just replaced it with such a throwaway society that we just bought new and left it in the attic. That was a lesson. So carrying your bag, you think, I don't need stuff. And then 2020 in the attic, we were horrified. And then, we had to sort our parents' homes. And you realize that all of this stuff that we have becomes somebody else's junk. And we know our kids do not want our junk. So I don't want to leave that for them to sort out. So again, we're kind of streamlining our life, and everything that we have, the messages we have these days are about buy this and it'll make you happy, do this because you need this in your life, or you need the latest thing. And I think there's a movement against that generally in people. It's like, do I need this? Should I buy that? And traveling and walking feeds into that and makes us realize, no, we don't.
100%. By the way, I don't know like exactly what kind of clothings, but one trick I do sometimes is just layer up as much as I can. They can't they can't stop you from taking it on if it's on your literally on you. So.
Exactly. We do say that. Okay, I have got one pair of it's like jean-like trousers. I'm gonna have to wear those. It's 36 degrees and I've got a coat on and my heaviest clothes and the shoes. And it's like, okay, just get me on this plane. And we wear our earplugs and you've got your phone in your hand.
You mentioned you still have your home, right? So I wanna touch on that a little bit. There was an article where you shared some tips for older travelers in general, but then there was something specific you mentioned as far as house swapping. So I've heard, obviously, I know about house sitting, pet sitting, maybe can relate as well. But talk a little bit more about house swapping, and I guess obviously what your experience is with that. And then after that, if you like, you can share a few tips, some of those tips that you spoke about for older travelers as well.
Yeah, we do still have our home and we still have our family home. And this is a constant revolving conversation with us because we know that we no longer need our family home, nor do we really want to have our family home. But at the same time, we love the house. We've been in it for nearly 20 years. It works for us. And so it's a constant circle for us. We feel we want something easier. We have all these different ideas, but we're kind of stuck where we are because we don't know what we want moving forward. And one of the things about our home is that we know we can house swap. It's very popular. It's in one of the most visited places in the world. And we've got a really nice family home, swimming pool and nice garden. And, we know that we get so many requests from people who would like to swap house with us. And we started house swapping when our children were little. Before the internet, we used to get a book once a year and you'd go through the pages and think, oh, that looks nice. And then you'd have to write to them or phone them up and say, hey, do you want to come to England, where we were then in the southwest of England? And obviously now is a website. And we used a company called HomeLink, but there are many. Mm-hmm. And we've stuck with HomeLink. It works for us. And when our children were younger, we swapped with families, and now we tend to swap with older people. Our house is not set up for kids anymore. And it's certainly not ideal for little children. We don't have any of the things that you would need if you were a family. So we tend to swap with older people. And there are many advantages to it. You have to be the right sort of person to let somebody come into your home, for sure. And it isn't for everyone. But for us, we get to, the biggest attraction for anybody is that it's free. You have a home that somebody wants to visit, and they have a home that you want to visit, and you can swap and it won't cost you anything. So, for example, we did 3 swaps in one trip in Canada. We went to around Vancouver Island and the Gulf Islands, and then we went into Banff and Calgary area, and then we went over to Toronto area. And those 3 swaps were free. Canada is not an inexpensive country to visit, But for 8 weeks, we had free accommodation and the use of a car. Yeah. So that is a big attraction. But beyond that, in each of those places, we met their friends, we met people, we had local knowledge. Their friends took us out on a boat trip. They took my husband salmon fishing. We were told where the best trails would be, the best local restaurants. We tell people the places that we love to go to, where the best supermarket is, where they can park, the best time to go somewhere to avoid the crowds. When places are closed, so don't go there on a Wednesday or what have you. So you get this mine of information from a local. You have your car, and you have all the comforts of somebody's home rather than a hotel room, rather than a holiday apartment, which might be comfortable but isn't equipped like a home. So you really have this home away from home. When we were in Washington State, we went to the neighbors' Labor Day barbecue and met all the friends and neighbors of the people we were swapping with. So it's so much more than just a house that you're swapping.
Yeah.
And your experience, and you go deeper, so much deeper. Your experience is just so much wider because of that knowledge that they're feeding you. Also, if you have a problem, you're just a phone call away. So we leave contact details for either English speaking French friends or English friends. So if you have a medical emergency or a plumbing problem, you just phone somebody and we know that they'll come and help you. So it is a really great way to see different cultures and travel the world. The disadvantages are, for many people, you have to be open to letting a stranger into your home and live your life. And, I get that that isn't easy. What we did and what we have done, and I would recommend people do, if you want to go this route, we have a completely different set of linen, bed linen and towels and household linen for when we have house sitters or house swaps. So our pillows, our bedding, our duvets, our towels, we've washed them and put them away. And we have separate sets that we use for visitors. So, because people say, how you have somebody sleeping in your bed? And it's like, well, they're not on our pillows, they're not in our bedding, they're not, it's just the surface of it. And you have a mattress protector, that's washed. So it doesn't bother us. Anything that's really precious, we put away. And that isn't your family jewelry. It's like our favorite mug or a little treasure that we would be heartbroken to lose that the kids might have made, or that was our grandmother's or something. We just put all of that stuff in a box and just lock it away. Not because we think they're going to steal it, but because it's really precious to us and we don't want to get it broken or damaged. And so anything that's a real really important to you that you'd hate to lose. Think about if your house was on fire, what would you grab? We put
Yeah.
those things in a box and just put them out the way somewhere so they're not going to get damaged. Over the years, we have a system of great big, you have IKEA, don't you? Your IKEA, if you call it that. And they're the great big plastic storage boxes. And we have a system now where we just put all of our stuff in that, stack them up, put them away, and move the house sitter stuff in instead. So we feel as though our personal treasures, they're just tucked away somewhere. Our linen, our towels, they're all out of the way. And when we come home, we just put them back.
That's amazing. I was not expecting at all the element of being able to interact with like the friends of the family that you've swapped with. Definitely adds an added element to it. That was completely surprising. I'm surprised I never really heard of that concept before. Again, obviously house sitting. I know about. Is it sometimes with the when you swap as well? Like, does that at all maybe involve pets also by chance, or usually it's just okay, fair. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely pets. So I see your cat, very pretty cat, by the way.
Yeah.
So we love it if we find a house that have got a cat, because then they can come and look after our old cat as well. We have never swapped with anybody who has a dog, and a lot of people don't leave their dogs with strangers, but cats
Yeah.
definitely. And it's really lovely, especially if you are a real cat person and a cat will come and sit on your lap at night. It's sort of
Mhm.
part of that experience. It is definitely this home away from home. And you'd most probably think, oh, I couldn't go away and leave my cat. But if you think another cat lover is coming in and going to look after your cat,
Makes it
then it
easier.
doesn't seem so bad.
That makes sense. That's awesome. I'll have to do some more research, but you said it was a House Link, right? House Link.
We use a company called HomeLink. There
Oh,
are a few others, and I love HomeLink because some of them have like 3 or 4 way swaps, and you kind of gather points. So like if you didn't want to come to France, but somebody in Britain wanted to come to France and you wanted to go to Britain, you can do these 3 way swaps. And I like that we build a relationship with the person we're swapping with. And we are going to their home and they're coming to ours. So we're invested in each other. And there's that mutual trust. And I feel as if you're collecting points or you're not going to that person's house, then you haven't got that same relationship. And that's just my opinion, because they are very popular, the others, but I like to know who's coming into my house. And we have become friends with all of the people that we've swapped with, because you feel you get to know them very well. So we use HomeLink, and they vet you before you can join. There's a vetting process, and you can review the house that you've been in, so you can read what other people are saying. But it boils down to trust. Ultimately, it
sure.
is just down to trust. And the other thing is, we have our old house in southwest France, and a lot of people say, yeah, but I've only got an apartment in XYZ. And sometimes we want to go to XYZ. And if you've got a nice apartment, it might be perfect for us. So it doesn't matter if you have a small house or a big house, it's rural or in a city. If you live in a place where people want to go, we used to live in rural Devon, and we had a message once from a guy who had this really beautiful house in Hawaii, and he wanted to come to our house because he was tracing his family tree, and his family originated from our area. And unfortunately, the dates didn't work. But he had this amazing villa on the sea in Hawaii. And he wanted to come to our little Devon cottage because just his family roots. So
Yeah.
I think the membership now is about 150 a year. We also took out a separate insurance policy for the car and the house, because you swap cars as well.
Hmm.
But you could swap 20 times a year if you wanted to, which would save you
Saves you, yeah, so
thousands.
much money. Saves you so much
And
money.
often as well, when we did like America, when we went to the US, we threw in side trips. So we were in Washington and then we went to Yellowstone independently and then went down to California. So you can throw in a few side trips and you can pay for that. But obviously it's diluted over the cost of the whole trip. And one other advantage of it, if you're like me, so I'm celiac, I can't eat gluten. So having a kitchen and being able to go to a supermarket is really important and makes life so much easier. But more than that, it's cheaper. And actually, one of the things that we miss the most when we're traveling is just to be able to go into a supermarket and cook our own meal. So you're going into a house that's got a kitchen that's fully equipped, and you can go to the local supermarket as well. So it's a win-win in every situation, but you have to get over that thing of a stranger in your house.
Yeah. Yeah. Which, yeah, as you said, can be a big step, but again, also as you said, like the what you can get from that, it's pretty awesome actually. Like I wish, I mean, I know I'm in this house. It's not my house to swap, but but it'd be amazing for sure to be in that situation. Um, and actually, you mentioned that could actually be the tip as well. You mentioned having a place, whether you're doing a house swap or renting a place. where you're able to have a kitchen and cook and go to the local groceries and save a little bit of money. So I think that's a good tip as well
Absolutely.
overall
You can
for.
also do that on the Camino, actually. The hostels have kitchens. So again, you can save money just by feeding yourself that way.
Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. Um, I know something for you that you talk about in your blog. A lot of people that believe traveling like this, or maybe traveling in general, is only for the young. So, what do you think people get wrong about traveling later in life?
Um, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, the whole thing about you're too old to do it. And it is true as you get older, you certainly get more apprehensive and you lose the confidence. You know, when you're young, you feel as though life will go on forever and that you're in defense, you know, I can't even think of the word, but you're like Superman, you know, nothing's going to get you. You're certainly not going to be struck down by illness. You'll bounce back from everything and you're full of excitement and wonder. And I wish we could bottle that and keep that amazing enthusiasm for what life has in store, because we get jaded as we get older, you know, and that's really sad that we lose that spark and that curiosity. And I think, harping back to the Camino, but I think one of the things in that space of walking the Camino was that young girl that I was, that young person that wanted to go to Rarotonga or that believed that I could do things, it kind of reignites that in your head. You know, I don't know how old you are, and I can't figure out how old you are, but as you get older and you get a mortgage and you have family and you have commitments, those things that you believe made you Superman kind of all get pushed aside and you become part of this treadmill sometimes. You lose confidence that maybe you can't do it anymore, or that you're too old, or that you won't enjoy it, or that you'll be fearful. No, it is quite scary. The first trip we did on our own on this independent adventure was Jordan in the Middle East, and we hired a car and we left Amman and went and picked up our car at the airport and sat in this tiny little Suzuki car that looked like a cartoon car, and almost like, okay, you know, here we go, we're just going to drive all the way across Jordan on our own, and it's going to be fine. It's okay. So you're terrified, and I think for me personally, the older I've got, the more afraid I've become of the world. And you have to fight that. You know, you're afraid for your kids. You're afraid financially. You're afraid about your health. You just become more fearful. I don't know if life does that to some people. So it is gaining that belief that you can do this. And when we started off, we were, oh my goodness, what are we doing? This is crazy. You know, even I think some of our friends and family are like, you're just going to die. You're going to get yourself killed. And but slowly our confidence returned, and you know, walking the Camino, harping back to it, sorry, but that gave me a belief and a confidence that, you know, I can do stuff. And one of the ladies that walk with me, I walk with a lot of people who are in their late 60s and 70s who come with me. And one lady who was 71 said, I can do hard things. You know, this woman had been a nurse all her life. She could do all sorts of hard things, but
Yeah.
maybe had forgotten that she really could do difficult things. And so when we get to retirement, or close to retirement, maybe we think, I'll take up gardening or a craft. And there's nothing wrong with that. But
Mm.
we limit our beliefs of what we can do. And that might be because you don't have your income coming in. And that's a scary thing when you retire and if you've earned money and good money all your life, suddenly it's your pension and you know, you don't have that ability to get a paycheck every month. Um, so we're limited by, I don't know, is it society norms that we think it's too expensive, too difficult, impossible for us, I'm too old, and all of these things that life kind of gives you as you get old. It's a joy getting old.
Well, it kind of like they say they have the acronym for fear, right? False evidence appearing real. I think sometimes like and maybe easier said than done, but sometimes you gain the confidence in something really just from doing it, which I don't know, maybe is seems easier said than done, but it happens like that. I think especially with travel for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
So
that's absolutely true. And one of the things, I guess, as well, you saying that, because you said you started traveling when you were younger, I think that's also quite a big thing. To step
hmm,
into the unknown. If you are, we've met people in their late teens and 20s who are here from the US or the UK, in Southeast Asia, or some far-flung corner of the world. You think that's a huge thing. As a
yeah,
parent, I'd be terrified, if your kid's off to Borneo, or, doing some of the things that we've done. And yet off they go, fearless again, invincible, but no, that's the word, invincible.
hmm.
um, so, and we've learned, we have met a lot of young people on the road and learned a great deal from them. About how they feel, learned a great deal about parenting, sitting down and talking to them about their side of what it feels like to be parented as a young adult and as an adult, and they feel that they get something from us, from from our point of view when we sit down and share a meal when you're traveling, as you do even when you're walking. And we've made friends and continue to be friends with a lot of younger people, but also made great friendships with older people who are traveling, and you end up spending a few days with them and then maybe meet up again somewhere else in the world. I think a lot of it actually is, finance aside, it's down to confidence
Hmm.
and the stereotype that we're fed about what the world is like and what people are like. And we've done some crazy things and been in some weird situations and sat down with people around the world and just realized that we're all the same. We
Yeah.
sat in we did a walking tour in Jaisalmer, which is on the edge of the desert in India. And
Hmm.
it's a big old fort that we wanted to see. And we like doing locals will take you on little walking tours. And we were talking to this guy, and he said, "Oh, because you're a musician? Oh, my grandfather was a musician to the Maharaja." And so he's on his phone, and he said, "Oh, do you want to come to tea and meet my grandfather?" so, so we wandered off through these back streets of this ancient fort that was still in use, and it's tiny, tiny little, very humble house. And this old guy sat on his bed, and I'm sat beside him, and he was probably thinking, "Why is this woman sat on my bed?" A complete stranger. And he got out his little keyboard, and he sang and played for us, and we drank tea with this walking guy and his two brothers, and communicated with his grandfather over his music and my music. It's such a surreal thing to be sat doing this in the middle of some tiny village in India that we would
Yeah.
never have done 10 years ago, but now think is perfectly normal.
So then I'll ask this then, and I know we're going long, which is amazing, but still I want to.
Sorry, I talk too much.
No. You're totally fine. You're totally fine. I don't want to. You're over in Cambodia. I don't want to take up your time to explore or whatnot. So
Well, we only arrived, so we go slow. So we've got nothing planned. We're going on a cooking class at 3:30. So we've got like 6 hours. So you're fine.
very good, very good. Um, so then with your experiences, right? You obviously just talked about the one in India and meeting younger people and older people in your travels. For an older traveler who now is finally having the time and freedom to travel a bit, or just decides they want to do something. Based on your experiences as an older traveler, what would be your advice to them? Like maybe the first step or first thing that they can do to step into that traveling.
I think most people that we know, I mean, it's difficult because now we're in this world, we feel as though we know so many retired travelers, but it's because it's our sphere. And so we're naturally gravitating to that community. But when we think about our community outside of that, most people think we're crazy. Some people think we're super rich, and we are definitely not that. And that's really important to know, that you do not have to stay in luxury hotels in order to have an amazing experience. I mean, we're in a really lovely hotel in Siem Reap, and Angkor Wat and all of the temples are just a mile or so away. But as wonderful as this hotel and comfortable as it is, it's a community project hotel, and it's like a training hotel which gives kids a chance to speak another language and learn a skill and a trade so they can get employment. And so we're paying just €30 a night for a fabulous room and bathroom in this beautiful hotel, which has 2 swimming pools for €30. That is not beyond most people's budgets. So travel doesn't, and even flights, if you're happy to go economy and find the cheapest flights, you can hunt around and find low cost. So not having, and I know if you have very little, then that sounds patronizing, but if you want to travel and you only have a small budget, it's still possible. When we're traveling, we use buses. One, because I hate the hassle of airports and all that goes with it. And a local bus is quite fun, but local buses are also really inexpensive. And like traveling through South America on buses, the buses in South America and actually in Southeast Asia are really great buses. You can travel a long distance on a sort of a semi-lie flat seat for maybe 15 or 20 euros. So again, don't let budget be the thing that stops you. You just have to accommodate your budget and be ruthless about sticking to it. But if confidence is what's holding you back, plan a trip to an area that you feel you can cope with. You're in the US, so you have got so much on your doorstep that you could explore that's totally different from your own environment. So, if you are in Europe, you can do the same. There is so much that you can get to on a bus or a plane or a train and go explore. And you don't have to say, I'm going off for 6 months and traveling the world with a rucksack. Pack a small suitcase and go for a week and test the water and see how your planning went and see how you could stick to your budget. If you're solo traveling, did you enjoy it if you went on your own? And figure out what you liked and what you didn't like and what you would do differently the next time. We didn't jump in and say, we're going to travel the world. We had a list of places we wanted to go to, and we thought that we would do them as holidays, and we chose to do them independently because we couldn't afford to do this as on tours. Tours are just too expensive. So that's the only reason we went independently to start with. And then we thought, actually, I really enjoy this way of travel. And so we've found a way that works for us. And to start with, we went super cheap, and we realized that, okay, we like a little bit of comfort, but we've then tried hotels, and we're like, oh, we don't like the hotels. They're anonymous. And a friend of mine coined a phrase that they're vanilla, and I totally get that. You could be anywhere, and I don't want to feel like I'm anywhere. I want to feel like I'm in Cambodia or Africa or Argentina. So we found a middle ground. And every now and then, if we've been, like we traveled overland through Africa from Victoria Falls to Cape Town, and we did it on a truck camping. And because we wanted to go to Africa and we couldn't afford the fancy safaris. And so we chose an organized trip for the over 40s. And whilst we camped, what I loved is that we had a camp bed, so we didn't have to get down on the floor every night. There was this little help to get, but it was cheaper, and it meant that we could do it. we would never have done that independently, but at the same time, we felt like we were having an adventure. So just find the point where you think that's my limit,
Yeah.
and try that out and test the waters. And then once you've had a little taste for it, you'll either think, oh God, that is not for me, and that's absolutely fine, or you might think, okay, well that worked, and I might do this differently next time. You don't have to go all in to start with. Just find your comfort zone, and have a little bit of faith in yourself, and listen to the younger you.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Uh, is there, so when it comes to, older independent travelers or even walking the Camino, is there anything else you'd like to add, or are you ready to move on?
No, I would also say if you are traveling, we made a mistake initially, the whole Barcelona thing, that you know
Mm.
that there are iconic places that you want to tick off, but go beyond that and look beyond that. So like, we're here in Siem Reap, and obviously we came here first of all because of Angkor Wat, and we wanted to see the temples. And once we were here, we realized there was so much more to see, which is why we've come back to do the things that we missed. So, of course, go to those. You're not going to go to Egypt and not go visit the pyramids. But maybe when you're in Egypt, if you've gone that far, never cross the border and go and visit Jordan. And don't just go to Petra, because there are places in Jordan that you have not heard of that will be amazing, like Dana Biosphere and a place called Fainan, which is a total eco hotel in the middle of the desert. And you can go off hiking with the Bedouin and go stargazing with the Bedouin and have these experiences that you've never heard of. So just scratch a little surface beyond the obvious, and you get away from the crowd. And sometimes you go to places and you think, oh yeah, that didn't quite work out, and that was a bit dull. But you just roll with that and accept the losses.
Yeah. And actually with that, you can at least say you've been there and you saw it for yourself, and you can understand why it didn't work out for you for whatever reason.
Yeah,
That makes sense. That makes sense.
exactly. One thing I would say as well, which is especially important for older travelers, is, but for everyone, just get travel insurance. And not only get travel insurance, but read the fine print. Just know exactly, and that is a cost without a doubt, but that is not a cost you should scrimp on. I've been in far too many hospitals on my travels to know that I really, really need good health insurance, from parasites in Peru to what have you. But you need to have good travel insurance, and it isn't about covering yourself for a cancelled flight, because that happens and you have to
Yeah.
just suck that up. But it's for when you truly need insurance, for sickness, or for getting you back to your home country, or in the case of disasters, if there's an earthquake or some uh, world pandemic or something where you need your insurance. So don't cut corners on your travel insurance.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. I unfortunately have some not negative experience, but basically, yeah, there was a point where I ran in a situation where that would have been helpful. Luckily, I was able to pay out of pocket, no problem. But yes, firsthand, I've have experience with not having that insurance. So definitely a good
And
good tip.
with all insurance, we think it is about if you're sick, or if your flight is cancelled, or your bag is stolen. But it's actually about if you trip over a paving stone and you break a leg. It's that kind of thing, that it's
Yeah.
the mundane that you most need your insurance for.
Hmm. You never know. And even to add to that, sometimes you might be, as you said, you might be doing a trip where you're thinking, oh, nothing's going to happen. I'm not doing anything that's active, but something random and little can make a big difference, unfortunately.
Exactly. And the other thing I would say as well as a tip is take a photocopy of your passport and your insurance documents, and prescription medicines and that kind of thing. And not only have it on your phone or with you, but leave it with a family member so that if you lost your passport or you needed your insurance, you could just phone them and they will have a copy of all of that really important documentation.
Mm-hmm. Very good. That is very good. All right, let's transition. We're actually almost at the end of the interview, but I do want to ask a few rapid fire questions and then give you 30 seconds of glory to have the floor. So, first couple questions with for rapid fire. So you and your partner Jerry, your husband, who we mentioned, um, what was the first trip you guys took together that made you think, we're actually good at doing this together? Does that make sense?
I mean, the first trip we took together was to France when we lived in the UK. And I guess we kind of knew then that we were, going to be together forever. But I think as far as traveling, and then we did all the home swapping and holidays, which everybody does. And that all worked fine. Obviously, we've been together for decades. And so we knew that was good. But I think first of all, moving to a foreign country made us realize that we were a unit, and a strong unit. And not everybody who retires wants to spend every minute of every day with their partner, no matter how much you love them. It's like your kids or kids with parents. No matter how much you love people, it may not be that you want to do every single thing together. Um, so I guess that trip in Jordan, when we were in the car for a month and we were thrown into that different environment, we thought, actually, we can do that. And then when we started and we went to Peru and I had a parasite infection, and that was almost on one of our first trips. We got through it and laughed about it. So I guess we thought, wow, if we can deal with parasites, we can deal with pretty much anything.
I love it. I love it. Hopefully that wasn't too long with the health there in Peru. But
No.
um, next one then. After 20 plus Caminos, about to do your 24th, and of course we talked about luggage and having 8 kilos. What's the one item that you can't go without when you're on a Camino?
Very controversial. I would say my phone. My life is on that phone, and my book, and my history book, and my camera, and my communication with the outside world. And I know people say go offline. You don't need to be connected to have everything that you need on your phone. So I guess whenever I'm traveling, my smartphone now is important. I think beyond that, for when I'm hiking, my hiking shoes. I have got feet that are as wide as they are long, and I struggle to find the right pair of shoes that don't give me blisters. So I can replace pretty much everything in my kit, I guess, but finding the perfect pair of shoes that's going to allow me to walk and move around every day, I wouldn't leave home without actually for me, they're the Ultra Lone Peaks, which are the widest foot-shaped shoe I can find.
Fair play. And then lastly, going back to being a musician, you're at the end of your set. What song are you closing the show with?
Well, we have a trio of songs that we close the show with, and it started with I Will Survive,
Mm-hmm. Classic.
going into Dancing Queen,
Mm-hmm.
and then we used to end kind of on an encore, would depend on the audience. It was Shout, Lulu, Shout, or depending on the audience, it would be Hey Jude by the Beatles.
Okay. Very different at the end, but as you said, depending on the audience.
If they were kind of a group, a bit lovey-dovey, or if it's a big crowd, Hey Jude is perfect because they all sway and love each other and are shouting and cheering. But if it's like an event, like on the ship where people didn't really know each other, then Shout would just get them all.
That makes sense. I actually worked on ships for a while myself, so yeah, I think
cool. I can tell you the most popular song in our set, which we didn't end in, but was the most popular song, no matter the audience or where in the world we were, which was My Girl.
Really? I mean, a great song though, for sure. I love it. I love it. All right, so you did it, Colleen. We've come to the end of the interview. So now you have the floor for 30 seconds of glory. share what you have going on or drop some more words of wisdom.
What's going on? We're just traveling, trying to figure out what we do with the rest of our lives. If you want to find out more about the Camino, go to my website. I do have a course where I talk as much as this on video about everything that I've learned and how you can plan. And I show the websites that I use, and I unpack my bag and talk about a Camino day. And I don't know when this is going out, but I have one place left on a cancellation on my April Camino. So if somebody wants to come, it has to be a lady because you're sharing with another lady. It is a Camino that is going to be going from Portugal into Spain. And it's very nice hotels because that's what this group asked for. So if you want to do it and you want to stay in some very nice hotels and you're happy to share with another lady and you're free from April, then you can come and walk with me.
Thanks again to Colleen for joining me today and sharing her tips and insight. If you'd like to connect with her or reach out about one-on-one coaching or courses for the Camino, feel free to check out her website. Links in the description. Now, as I mentioned, I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about unexpected ways that community possibly shows up on the road, as long as some other alternative ways to explore while you're doing your travels. First off, as far as those potentially unexpected ways that you run into community while on the road. Now, for me, one of the places I like to stay typically if I'm in travel mode is at hostels for accommodation. So with that, if you happen to come across a good hostel, usually they have ways built in to create that community, whether it's just having a commons area where obviously people can sit and chat and interact, or if they go about it more actively and promote different activities, games, whatever it be, so that people naturally connect with each other. That's pretty self-explanatory, so I won't go into much with that. Of course, we do have online communities as well, meetup groups, different platforms like that, where you can find different events and activities going on, whatever city you're in. But now, as far as maybe some unexpected ways or ways that aren't necessarily thought about as much, first idea, local gyms in the area. So for those who are in that workout community, there is obviously that sense of community already within the gym culture and whatnot. For some of you who may be involved in CrossFit, for example, things like that, I know there's other niches, more or less, that have different gyms or locations worldwide. So in that sense, you have that community as you go about in your travels. But also from the sense of like the local gym in whatever location you're at. For example, me being based in Thailand a lot, I know there's a gym, just an outdoor, very small gym that particularly is usually for the Thai locals. That said, of course, they're very open to anyone coming to check it out. And I've had many experiences going there myself and telling others about it who've gone to said gym and really enjoyed the gym in itself, but also the atmosphere that was there, right? They're able to interact with the local Thai people, aside from just, going there to work out, but obviously make connections with those local people. And for them just to be accepting of them kind of goes into the, the mentality of a place that you go to and feel that sense of community, right? So depending on where you happen to be or wherever you're traveling to, just kind of look out for opportunities like that if you're one that enjoys doing the gym. If not, another way that might not be as obvious is just the local bars in the area. Now, of course, it's one thing when you're, if you happen to be staying in a hostel, for example, or meet people on the road, you can hang out with the people there. But depending on where you are, there's already a lot of such places, bars and whatnot, that are quite known for the community that is there, whether it's the local or a mix of, the Thai people, for example, as well as the expats that frequent there. For example, I remember first time I was lucky enough to go to Taipei in Taiwan. My driver from the airport, we had a conversation, obviously, and he recognized the area that I was going to, the place I was staying was close to this local bar that was well known for the Taiwanese people that would go through, but also the expats and that extended community that would go there as well. So, he obviously pitched it and mentioned I should check it out if I had the chance, and it was something that I was interested in. And of course I did. And sure enough, ended up meeting some really cool people there, as well as Taiwanese that were there. And actually through my time there, meeting up with them and, exploring together. So look for opportunities like that whilst you're on the road. Again, might not be something that you expect that can directly affect meeting people, but it's actually something that can work really well depending on where you end up. Now, on the flip side of that, sometimes there are places that are geared towards the local people as far as the countrymen and women of said place. So, for example, in Thailand, there might be a bar, for example, that is geared more so just for Thais only, which might not necessarily be explicit, but if you take a minute to notice, then you realize, oh, it's pretty much just Thai, for example. So do be mindful of this sort of situation depending on where you are. Sometimes there might be places that are geared towards that only. Now, you can think of that as you like, but it is a reality, and it's actually okay depending on the situation, right? Like, especially a place like Thailand, for example, depending on where you are, where you have a lot of traffic amongst expats and travelers in general. So be mindful of that, I suppose. Sure, there's a plethora of other ideas or avenues, but I don't want to go into it too long. Those are just two specific examples that you can use to build that sense of community if you happen to be on the road, especially if you're doing solo. Now, as far as some similar or alternative ways of exploring when it comes to the walks, I myself have done a walk of my own with some friends. Definitely not the length of a Camino, but back in Peru, I actually walked with a few friends from small town nearby Machu Picchu City into Machu Picchu, just along the train tracks. So it wasn't that long of a walk, longer than I guess thought in my mind, but I guess there's about a 10-kilometer situation going on. But again, we did have a few things and walk the train tracks. So sometimes the train would actually pass by and all the different terrain. So we did it slow. So maybe that's why it took a little bit longer, or at least felt a little bit longer. But that's probably the longest walk I've done. I've met others, of course, who have done a bit of that and maybe even hitchhiked to wherever they were heading to as well. I've also actually done, technically, I've bicycled from France to Spain. So again, spent a few days doing that. The goal was to get to Barcelona. Didn't end up there for a few different reasons. Don't want to go too far into it, but technically I can say I bicycled from France to Spain, and it was a pretty cool experience, especially just seeing the locals as they pass by and kind of be supportive and, honk their horns or give a thumbs up as I was going along my way. And honestly, that kind of just came out of nowhere. There was someone that I met who inspired the idea. He was older than me, and he was doing it. So I figured if he could do it, I can do it. So I've done that. I've met quite a few other people who have done a much longer or much involved biking adventure around the way. So I remember there was one guy I've met who's by bike with a few other friends wanted to bike across Africa. So what their reasons for, I honestly don't remember, but there's the fact that many people do adventures like this. I think there was another group that I actually met or heard of in France, actually, in Thailand rather, who was biking around Europe, I believe, starting from the Netherlands. So when you run into people like this, these are, sometimes they might have obviously trained a bit or prepped for this, but honestly, these are everyday people. Again, I'm not comparing my bike ride from France to Spain to some of those two that I mentioned, but I did my thing on a whim, honestly. So this isn't something that, you don't have to be at a certain level necessarily to do said things. You can kind of figure it out as you go. And if whatever that reason may be, if you feel inspired to do such a thing, honestly, just go for it. At the end of the day, however long it lasts, as long as you're having fun, it's a cool thing to do, right? You can do it just for yourself. You can do it for charity. There were some people I think who did it for charity for sure, or just for the sake of saying, yeah, I did this because why not, right? So if you have any questions, comments, or similar stories of adventure, feel free to reach out or drop a comment below. backpackersociety20@gmail.com. Thanks again to Colleen for joining me today. Thank you for listening. And until next time, be well.